So, a very warm welcome and good afternoon to one and all present here. I am Subramaniam, uh, Sports Law in India course coordinator and research assistant in the Maharashtra uh, National Law University, Mumbai. So, I take the privilege to introduce to you our day two first speaker, Mr. Tarun. So, Mr. Tarun serves as an assistant professor research at the esteemed Gujarat National Law University in Gandhinagar. He's a member of GNLU Center for Sports and Entertainment Law and is the co-founder of Doctrina Ludus, an initiative that promotes sports and sports law education in India. Mr. Tarun's expertise lies in sports law research, teaching, and consultancy. Mr. Tarun has been invited to deliver 7 courses and over 20 webinars and guest lectures at esteemed institutions such as AISTS India, General Global Law School, Kathmandu University School of Law, Symbiosis Law School, Hyderabad, and Mumbai University, to name a few. As a speaker and panelist, he has participated in the renowned ISLJ conference at Asser Institute, Netherlands. I hope I spelled that right. And the Sports Law and Policy Center Symposium in Bangalore. So he's an avid football enthusiast and goalkeeper and proudly identifies himself as a Madridista supporting Real Madrid. Mr. Tarun has a book to his name titled Ensuring Integrity Lessons from Judiciary, published by Thomson Reuters. So, apart from that, I came to know about Mr. Tarun only recently when I contacted him with regards to this course. So, he became a very good friend of mine, and he has shared with his network regarding our course, and he has also brought several speakers to our forum. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Tarun. So you may begin your session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Subramaniam. Thank you very much for that introduction. And, as a member of the sports law community of India, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that, best of the best speaker reaches out to the sports law enthusiasts that are coming in. When I started studying sports law way back in 2010-11, there were very limited opportunities. I'm really glad that MNLU has taken this initiative of starting a sports law certificate course, and that to a week long. I saw the lineup; it's absolutely brilliant. You've got one of the best speakers that you can have in India for the course. I was very, very thankful to Professor Mark James, who joined yesterday, as the chief guest and started off the course. A huge fan of him. I'm very, very lucky that I'm going to meet him this month, in the end of the month, at Acer Institute again, because again, I'm going to the ISLJ conference. So that's a huge opportunity, and that's a huge, I think, matter of honor and pleasure for me. But specifically, thanks to you, Subramaniam, for reaching out and, for making sure that this course happens. Thank you again, MNLU, for the invite, and I welcome each and every participant here. I saw yesterday there were almost 100 participants yesterday, so that's a huge positive. I'm really glad that people are taking interest in sports law, which is the need of the hour, because we've got a very vibrant culture of sports in India, predominantly dominated by cricket, but I'm seeing number of other sports coming in, and we need lawyers, we need policymakers, and most importantly, we need sports enthusiasts who understand what athletes, what the ecosystem goes through, and can contribute in developing a very sophisticated environment, a sporting environment in India. So extremely, extremely happy about that. I think there is something on the chat as well. Okay. Am I audible to everyone? Because somebody just told me they can't. Okay.
Yes.
Taruna, if I think maybe you can check your device. I'm clear. And if I'm still not clear, do let me know. I'll try to speak a little higher. Audible. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So in the next 1.5 hours, what I'll try to do is that I'll try to talk about this very important aspect of legal rights and responsibilities or duties of sports persons in India. And the best part is that very recently, and when I say very recently, it means 2019, the International Olympic Committee also recognized this whole aspect of legal rights and responsibilities of athletes who are a part of the whole Olympics movement and so on and so forth. And what I'll try to do in the next 1.5 hours is that I'm going to not to directly come to rights and duties of a sports person, but I want to first talk a bit about the ancient uh, Olympics, that from where all of it started. Then I want to talk about something called the rise of modern sport, which was known as from ritual to record, and I'll tell you why that's the scenario. I'm going to talk a bit about International Olympic Committee, that how it came into the existence, what's its roles and responsibility. Then I'm going to come into the IOC Athletes Commission, which is one of the most important bodies of the International Olympic Committee. And then I'm going to, in the end, talk about this declaration that happened very recently in 2018-19, which is called the Athletes' Rights and Responsibility Declaration, which is a part of the International Olympic Committee. But slowly and steadily, let's try to build up. And when we come to these rights and responsibilities, then we can actually, take examples from the sporting ecosystem. I'm very sure most of you must have heard of these examples, and that's why I want you to give me examples. So we can pick up one particular right or one particular responsibility, and you give me an example as to which particular instance comes to your mind when you hear that. All right, let's make it as interactive as possible, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, because I heard a few participants yesterday, I'm pretty sure that your knowledge when it comes to sport is way more sophisticated than my knowledge. And I'm not just saying it to make you feel good about it, but I'm extremely, extremely sure about it. Because maybe about cricket and football, I might have information, but there are a number of other sport about which I don't read on a regular basis. So please share it with everybody, because it's going to be beneficial for everyone. But let's go step by step and see how the scenario is. And first I want to take you and discuss about something called the ancient Olympics. If anybody has any idea about what ancient Olympics are, please feel free to unmute yourself and tell me, what is this whole Olympics about? How did they come into being? Let's not go to the modern Olympics, but let's just first talk about ancient Olympics, or even about modern Olympics. No problem. You tell me, what is Olympic Games? Why are they? Why do we have them? And any information, any fact, interesting, fun fact you want to talk about when it comes to the Olympics. Anybody, and the best would be if you can unmute yourself, because then it becomes very easy for me to also understand. Anything about the Olympic Games?
Sir, may I?
Absolutely.
Sir, may I?
Yeah.
So basically, the ancient Olympics, the system was came into a place to honor the ancient gods who lived on Mount Olympus, and the champions of whatever the XYZ sports that were played were considered as God's blessings or etc. And later on in the political scenario, it became the substitute for the modern warfare between Athens and Sparta. So that's how the ancient Olympics came into the prominence.
Absolutely, Anurag. That's a bang on answer about ancient Olympics. Anybody else who wants to add to what Anurag has added right now? Anything about Olympics? Yeah, please go ahead.
So, according to my information, the Olympics were originated in Greece. There is a place in Greece. So,
Yeah.
it was basically for common people, like after they work and all. It was for entertainment purpose and not that competitive sort of thing. It was like a mind refresher kind of thing.
Okay. That's a good base for what how ancient Olympics were. Anybody else who wants to add to what Anurag and Muskan just mentioned? Anything about the ancient Olympics, the modern Olympics, whatever. I'm sure everybody has heard about the Olympic Games. That yes,
And if
please
I'm
go ahead.
not wrong, I could just add that there were no prizes or no medals that were there.
Okay,
I think
okay,
it was a branch or something like that which was, given to them. I'm not
okay.
sure, but
The
I
The olive tree leaf.
Yes,
So,
leaves
okay.
were given.
Perfect. That's a very interesting point, Sheetal. Exactly. The olive leaves were given as as a crown to anybody who won a particular game in the Olympics. Anything else about ancient Olympics? Extremely interesting inputs coming in. That's quite positive.
One more thing, I think women were not allowed to participate.
Brilliant. That's a very important point, Sheetal, that women at that point of time were not allowed to participate in the Olympics.
I
Extremely
think
sad
I
state
think
of
there was
affairs
only
at that
one
point.
sport. I think there was only one sport women were allowed to participate.
Not in the ancient Olympics
No,
originally,
no, no.
Anurag.
It was originally there was just I think it was only one sport
Okay,
because
as per my
it was for the
reading,
yeah.
okay. Do share with us if if while this course is going on, in the ancient Olympics, if women were allowed in a particular tournament. I have my reservations about it, but please do. I can be wrong as well. Extremely important, Sheetal, what you
We'll
mentioned.
get back to you with confirmed
Yeah,
facts. So I think
absolutely.
first was to honor the goddess of funds. So that's how I remember reading it. I'll just check and get back to you.
Absolutely. Please do tell me. I can be absolutely wrong. That's what I'm saying. You will know better than me about a lot of things which we'll discuss today. Anything else that what Sheetal, Muskan, and Anurag just mentioned? And then we can move forward.
Uh, I would like to say something.
Please.
My name is Mohit
Mohit.
Ashwini.
Yeah,
I'm
please,
from the
Mohit.
sport of fencing.
Okay.
Ancient Olympics. You might have watched a movie Gladiator.
Have.
Yes. Ancient Olympics were more brutal. They were more, full of, you can say, fights and all. Slaves were there, and
Absolutely.
people used to enjoy blood spreading here and there. As far as
Absolutely.
modern Olympics are concerned, 1896, Athens, and the father of all games, PRC Coubertin was there, and
Absolutely.
there were 5 spots in modern Olympics,
Right.
including fencing. I would
Perfect.
like to say fencing. Why fencing was there? Because PSD Coubertin was himself a fencer, and now
Absolutely. Oh, acha,
also
that I did not know.
IOC President Thomas Bach is Montreal Olympics 1976 gold medalist in fencing.
Oh, brilliant. That's a very interesting fact. I absolutely did not know this. Mohit, you're taking away my limelight, but great. Thank you for so much for doing this. George has mentioned something. George, if you can just unmute yourself, I think that will be better because you've mentioned something important, I think. If it's possible for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Am I audible right now?
Yeah, absolutely you are. Please go ahead.
So I remember reading about this quite a while back that married women were barred from attending the events, and there
Right.
was a rule that there was a death penalty which could have been imposed on the married women as well.
Oh, perfect. That's very important, and we'll come to that as well. I'll wait for whenever Anurag you get to tell us about which sport. I'll move forward till then, and do let us know if you find the sport. Uh,
Continuing on George's points,
yeah,
so unmarried women were allowed to participate in athletics as it was considered Greek goddess Hera's festival, HERA. Only
but was
unmarried
that
women
part of
were.
the ancient Olympics?
Yeah, that's what even the research says. Even there was
Okay,
it's written by a researcher named Pausanias
okay,
who described ancient unmarried women in ancient Olympics.
okay. Because I picked the information from the Olympic website. There they said that no women was allowed at that point of time. But please do share this particular research with us. I think everybody should benefit from this. Thank you for that, Anurag. Let's very quickly go through what everybody has already spoken and see the whole scenario of the ancient Olympics. So the research says that between 776 BC and 393 AD, in every 4 years, we used to have ancient Olympics in what was mentioned by, I think, Sheetal or Muskan, which happened in the Athens or Athena at that point of time. And Greek males were allowed to be a part of this whole aspect of Olympics. And it was considered to be a religious festival where they celebrated God, Lord Zeus, which was the most important entity at that point of time. So anybody who used to win it, win various competitions, was known to be the son of Zeus and so on and so forth. And there was a lot of attention given to which I think Mohit mentioned, to blood, to fighting against each other. There were a number of times when somebody wanted to tap out while a particular wrestling match is going on, and any kind of contact sport is going on, but a lot of people couldn't tap out because they were dead. So those kind of scenarios were happening at that point of time in the ancient Olympics. You had 8 major sport at that point of time, which included boxing, you had chariot racing, long jump, javelin, discus. Pancration is one kind of martial art that used to happen at that point of time. You had running and wrestling. So these were predominantly the 8 sport that used to happen. Another very, very important, some 3-4 very interesting facts about the ancient Olympics were, which one you just mentioned. One was that all athletes competed naked, at that point of time. Corporal punishment was part of, the whole sanction, where if you do a false start in athletics or any of the tournament for that, corporal punishment was given. Anybody who can tell me very quickly what corporal punishment is? It's a legal term. If you can tell me what corporal punishment is.
Punishment to the body, like, flogging, or maybe cutting off the hand or something like
Absolutely. That. Anything which is which is going to do a bodily harm to you, creates pain in the body, is known as corporal punishment, and that was a part of the ancient Olympics. And another very important aspect was that there was no points, no time limit, or no weight classification in sports like boxing, even wrestling, if I remember correctly, for that matter, because it was just about that anybody could do anything. You challenge somebody in the Olympics. If you're a thin person, a person who's muscular, does not matter. You can come and fight against each other. Whoever the last man standing wins it. It was fight till death. Absolutely, Bhavishek, that's how you pronounce your name. It was just about fighting, and whoever survives, survives. If you don't survive, you don't tap out, you die. So that is how the whole Olympic, the ancient Olympics were structured. But this was something that was, after a point of time, people understood that this is not how a particular scenario should work, because it's extremely deadly for people who are participating, right? And in the 18th century and in the 19th century, there was something that happened in history which changed ancient Olympics to modern Olympics. If anybody can tell me what happened in the 18th century and which went till the 19th century as well. Something.
Is it Industrial Revolution or something?
The Industrial Revolution happened. Absolutely correct, Sheetal. The Industrial Revolution happened. And keeping in view what happened in the Industrial Revolution, this absolutely brilliant American historian, Alan Gutman, wrote this book called From Ritual to Record. And what he wrote essentially is that there are 7 reasons why ancient sport changed into modern sport, right? And with that change, what happened, he mentioned that in 7 points. If you ever get an opportunity to read this book, please do read it. It's called From Ritual to Record, and how the nature of modern sport changed. It was written by this great American historian, philosopher called Alan Gutman. And Gutman gives 7 points, and we're going to discuss them one by one. How ancient sport, which was considered to be a ritual, has now changed it to record. Right? Let's go one by one and see. The 19th century, which was considered to be the birth of modern world, which Sheetal mentioned correctly, it was majorly because of the reason that the Industrial Revolution came into the picture. And as soon as the Industrial Revolution came into the picture, it changed the modern world, right? And what had happened in the modern world was that, like every other aspect of society, sport also changed, because you had to change for good, you had to change for the betterment of the ecosystem, and so on and so forth. And there were 7 things which Gutman said that happened in the sports ecosystem which changed it completely. Number 1 was that it became secular. And when he said it became secular, it meant that from a particular ritual that was about celebrating Zeus, it was now cutthroat competition. A versus B, Real Madrid versus Barcelona, India versus Pakistan, and so on and so forth. So it was not only about a ritual that you have to celebrate Zeus or any other Greek god for that matter, but it is about competition. You have to fight, you have to win medals, you have to win championships, and so on and so forth. It said that it became there was an equality that came into being. Anybody who can explain me about equality in sport? What is your take on it? How did sports become equal? Anybody? Any idea as to what would be going in Alan Gutman's mind when he said equality in sport? And we're talking
Yeah,
about the 19th century and the change in the 19th century.
Sir,
yeah.
if
Good
I
evening,
may.
sir. Am I audible?
Yes, Anjana, let's go.
Yeah, sir. I'm actually doing my PhD, and I'm planning to do or work on something related to the gender disparity in Indian sports scenario.
Okay.
So when something like the word equality comes to my mind, I think it will be more a kind of like the gender pay gap that is still existing in the sports scenario,
Okay.
as and also that the achievement by women is less acknowledged in the society. So
Okay.
be it when you take into perspective the media or
Right.
as well as the individual. So that is what comes to my mind.
Okay. Okay. Fair point. Anybody else?
Sir, if I
Sir,
may.
may I?
Uh, let's take Shubhankar first, Muskan, right? If you don't mind. Please, Shubhankar.
Yes, sir. So according to me, I may be wrong also, sir, but in the World War times, there was a particular movie about a black athlete competing for USA, sir.
Okay.
So what we can see from this is that the racial bias, which was in their own countries, particularly,
Okay. Okay.
that has also been been equalized, because meaning that all the races have been allowed, because particular at times even India wasn't allowed to represent their own country, and even in
Right.
cricket for a particular period of time,
Right.
Indians were not allowed and only England was allowed. So yes.
Okay. Okay. Fair point. That's a great point. Muskan, if you want to go ahead.
Sir, in terms of gender equality, first of all, in ancient Olympics, women were not allowed to participate in Olympics. So
Right.
the first and foremost thing should be that they should be given the opportunity to take part in the Olympic Games so
Okay.
that there could be an equality between men and women.
Okay. Brilliant. And all of you are correct in some or the other way, but Alan Gutman is economic equality is what Rukaya has just mentioned. Uh, it's a very important aspect, the gender part. But Alan Gutman was writing about the ancient Olympics changing into modern games, and what he primarily meant was that somebody just mentioned about that India wasn't given an opportunity to even participate in its own name. It was the British India that was given, and the number of movies that have been made on it. But not only that, there was a time in sport, ladies and gentlemen, when particular people coming from a particular class of people, particular class, I'm sorry, were allowed to do or play a particular sport. I'll give you an example. If you read about the whole history of boxing, generally, and I'm not talking about Muhammad Ali's period or people before that, I'm even talking about even a period before that. Generally, you'll see slaves were boxers, and all these businessmen used to bet on them, right? If you see sports like cricket or sports like golf, all business class people or people coming from an affluent class used to be a part of it or used to play with it. Any kind of sport which was associated to body contact, let's take boxing, wrestling, was given to a particular class of people, who were slaves, and these businessmen used to bet on them. What Alan Gutman meant when it comes to equality was about opportunity. They said that now the scenario has changed. Now you'll find a boxer coming from various class in the society. He might be coming from a very affluent family. He might be coming from a very humble background. Jesse Owen, somebody just mentioned about. I'll just see it in the chat as well. And that is exactly what Alan Gutman meant about that. The class divide in sport was now diminishing. Now you will have, let's take India as an example, right? If you see Pro Kabaddi, you'll have people coming from Korea competing in the Pro Kabaddi League, and I kid you not, some of them are better than a lot of Indian players, because there is no boundary that is there when it comes to sport. It has migrated to various areas around the globe, and because of that, anybody coming from any particular class or any gender now can play any sport that they want. Well, that's what Alan Gutman meant when he said equality. He said that specialization has come into sport. If you've seen this Netflix series called Homegrown, there is this. It's a. Do watch it if you get an opportunity. There is this episode on Calcio Ferentino, which is a kind of football that's played in Italy. And if you don't like violence, please don't watch this episode, because the kind of football, traditional football that's played in Italy, in some sections of it, is not very, not a very good sight to watch, because after a particular match, when it gets over, people are in blood. They have to be taken to the hospital, because the whole aspect of this kind of football is that you can use any mode to stop your opponent. So you can kick, punch, hit them really hard. No, Gattuso is a different, Shreyas, a different category altogether. But this is about, because it was a ritual. It's a ritual in Italy. So Calcio Ferentino, do watch it. He said that now, from these traditional ways of playing sport, the new version of playing sport has come in. So you've got the modern football, what's known as the modern football, that has come into the entire picture. He said that rationalization has come into football, into sport. You have rule books now. You've got, how a particular game will be played, whether it's, made for cricket, football, boxing, so on and so forth. The most important aspect, the bureaucracy has come into sport, which means that the growth of leagues is going to happen. Growth of organization is going to happen. And we're going to talk about one of the most important organization in the next slide, which is the International Olympic Committee. He said that quantification has come into sport, that now, for a particular, let's take boxing, you've got a lightweight, a heavyweight, and a middleweight category. In cricket, you've got the under 15 or under 16, 19, 21, and then the main team, and so on and so forth, which wasn't happening in ancient sport. In ancient sport, anybody could be a part of it. They did not stop people from participating when it comes to their weight, keeping in view their weight, their height, and so on and so forth. But that changed. And in the end, he said that records were started, people started recording. You have the fastest man on planet Earth, which is Usain Thunderbolt. You've got one of the best boxers that you can see around the globe, Mary Kom from India. You've got Sachin Tendulkar, the man who has made the most runs, and so on and so forth. So these 7 aspects tell us that from ancient sport has changed now to what we call modern sport. And of course, within this modern sport, or within these 7 categories, there are a number of other categories that have come into. If you will think about modern sport, when it comes to, online gaming, you've got a very different scenario altogether. So that's how sport, every second, every minute, every hour is changing. And that's the most beautiful aspect about it. And with this change in sport, athletes are the most vulnerable class. And that's why, we have this lecture today on what are legal rights and responsibilities of athletes. We're going to come to that. Any questions, any inputs on this? If not, we'll move to the next slide. Any questions, any inputs? There was something that was put on the chat. I'll very quickly. Shreyas talked about good Gattuso. We'll speak about Jesse Owens and Hitler thought on the Aryan race as superior. Shreyas, if you can unmute yourself and tell us about the whole Jesse Owens aspect. That's a very good point, by the way. If you can hear me, Shreyas. In class, sir. Oh, you're in another class and being a part of this course? Oh, that's a typical student kind of a thing to do. Perfect. Whenever you can unmute yourself and you can tell us. Let's move very quickly to the next slide then. All right. And we just spoke about something called bureaucracy. And one of the prime example of sports and bureaucracy is the International Olympic Committee. And the reason why I'm discussing this, because I just wanted to trace the entire history as to how modern sport came into the being, bureaucracy came into the being, and how this bureaucracy has supported athletes to know their rights and responsibilities. So that's the entire intention of this particular lecture. All right. International Olympic Committee. Anybody who can very quickly tell me what is faster, higher, stronger, together, which I've put on the slide. Faster, higher, stronger, together. Anybody who has any idea?
May I?
Yes, please go ahead.
So this is the motto of IOC. I think
Absolutely.
it's originally in different language, CTS, Altius,
It's in Latin and French as well. But the English version of it, originally you did not have the word together. It's a very recent change that they've made. Now it's called faster, higher, stronger together. And a lot of people on the chat has put it's the motto of the International Olympic Committee. That's great. Anybody who can tell me about what the IOC is and why did it come into the being and what is the essential role of the IOC? What is IOC? What is the International Olympic Committee? Why was it made? How was it made? What's the reason of it for coming into being and so on and so forth? Yes, anybody? The IOC. Whatever you know about it.
Like a regulatory body.
Okay, perfect. It's a regulatory body. What Subramaniam just mentioned is absolutely correct. What else? Okay, if you can unmute yourself, that will be the best part. If it's possible for you. Rukaya, I think you have put something. I will.
Audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. It's authority responsible for modern Olympic Games. It is based in
Okay.
Switzerland.
Okay. Brilliant.
It is a regulatory body for Olympics, and everywhere
Okay.
that happens, they make new rules and regulations according to the country it is hosted in.
Okay, brilliant, Rukaya. Thank you very much for that. That its headquarters are in Lausanne, Switzerland, and it regulates the Olympic Games that happen around the globe. Every 4 years, you've got the Paralympics, you've got the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics. You have the University Olympics as well, which are the university games that happen. Anything else on the International Olympic Committee?
May I, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, the word together was added in the year 2021, and the new motto, that is faster, higher, stronger together, it reflects the virtues that every country's in the sense of sportsmanship or the spirit of sportsmanship should perish or they should always adhere to. So it also reflects on the values like friendship, respect towards each other. So these are not taken into the basis of the different nations that come into when it speaks about Olympics.
Brilliant, Anjanam. That's a very good point. Somebody has put something on the chat as well. It came in 1892 to reintroduce the Olympic game, first played in Athens. That's absolutely correct. Bhavishya Mehra, thank you very much for that, Bhavishya. That's a very important aspect. Let's very quickly see what the International Olympic Committee is all about, right? It was founded, first in Paris in the year 1894, and Pierre de Coubertin, who's considered to be the father of modern Olympics, thought that there has to be something in the bureaucracy which can control these Olympic Games and regulate them in the proper way, right? Its vision is to build a better world through the means of through the means of sport, and has three essential values, which Anjana ma'am just mentioned a while ago, which is excellence in sports, which is about friendship in sports or using sports, and which is about the most important aspect that's expected out of every athlete or any person who's part of the sporting ecosystem, that is respect. The first modern Olympic Games happened in 1896. Which happened in Athens after 2 years after the IOC came into being through the Olympic Congress that happened in Paris in 1894. Now you've got something called the Olympic Charter, right? And the Olympic Charter is nothing but the constitution of the International Olympic Committee. It has all the rules and the bylaws which are adopted by the IOC, how it's going to function, how the National Olympic Committees that are there in various countries, they will function, how the international federations that are there, whether it's whether it's FIFA, whether it's FIBA, and so on and so forth, how they will function. The first time the Olympic Charter was introduced was in 1908, and right now the charter which is in force was adopted on 8th of August 2021. And if you look at the charter, it's absolutely available on the Olympic website. You can check from there. It has 6 chapters, and I just wanted to go through one of the most important chapters, which is chapter number 6, because it talks about something which is legal in nature. It talks about measures, sanctions, disciplinary proceedings, and the dispute resolution mechanism. And what it says that if you violate the Olympic Charter, the World Anti-Doping Code, which we will, just talk when we talk about rights and responsibilities, if you violate the Olympic Movement Code on the prevention of manipulations of competition, or any other regulation that has come out, or which is brought by the IOC, you will be booked. Any international federation, any NOC, which is the National Olympic Committee, can be booked under this Chapter 6 for any kind of sanction, disciplinary proceedings, and so on and so forth. And another very important question which a lot of people ask, that how does the Court of Arbitration for Sport comes into the being? Anybody who can quickly tell us what the Court of Arbitration for Sport is? Very, very quickly. It's a legal thing, very important. CAS, which we call CAS.
Yes, CAS. So basically is a court which settles the disputes between, let's say, players, countries, and clubs, if there are, be it financial, be it, regarding doping and everything. It covers everything, and it is another court. Like for example, if a player is not satisfied with the ruling of FIFA or International Olympic Committee, they can go to CAS for appealing their decision. Yes.
Absolutely. Even now, what they've done is that within the contract of a particular player, they generally, they also get an opportunity to straight away go to CAS now, keeping in view that, a redressal mechanism needs to be done. Very quickly, I'll tell you what CAS is. So the Court of Arbitration for Sport, somebody used a very apt word for it. It's the Supreme Court of, of anything which is related to sport. It's again in Lausanne, Switzerland. And what happens in Lausanne, Switzerland is that they've made a structure where any kind of commercial matter or any kind of disciplinary matter, there are two kinds of matter that generally goes to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, can go there. An athlete, any body which is associated to sport, can reach out to CAS for redressal. And I think, if I'm correct, Article 61 of the Olympic Charter says that any dispute which arises in the occasion of Olympic Games can be, a particular party can straight away go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and then the matter will be taken care of by CAS through the Court of Sports Related Arbitration. Right? I think there will be people who will be teaching you about dispute resolution in this course, so I don't want to take away their part of discussion, because that will be a little unfair. But whenever you get an opportunity, the best part about which surprises me, and which is a very, very good thing actually, that anything about CAS, anything about IOC, or anything about WADA and so on and so forth, these regulators around the globe, all the information about them will be on their website. How they work, who are their members, what's the whole scenario, how things are taken into consideration when it comes to dispute resolution. You will find everything from A to Z on their website. So please go and read about these things on their website. It's a very, very interesting read, a very necessary read, because that's how you'll understand how the whole dispute resolution mechanism functions in the world of sport. Very quickly moving, before I move forward, anybody who can tell me about the membership aspect of the IOC? Is India a member of the IOC? Is India a member of the IOC?
Okay. Yes, definitely.
Abhishek said yes. Shahid said yes. Anithram said yes. Shreyasi Vats said yes. I'm sorry if that's not the pronunciation. Somebody unmuted themselves and also said yes. Who were these people? Mohit has said yes. Okay. Is United States of America is a member of the IOC?
Yes.
Okay, Muskan has said yes. Mohit has also said yes. Perfect. Anybody who thinks no is the answer? Okay, I think that no is the answer, because that is exactly what the whole scenario is. Please remember this for everybody. No country can be a member of the IOC. You can have a registered Olympic committee under the IOC, but that does not make you a member of it. You can get recognized by the IOC. Members of the IOC will be always a natural person. Now, when I say natural person, that means that no corporate or any other organization can be a part of it. You will have human beings who will be a member of the IOC. Anybody who can tell me from India who is the member of the IOC? Just for clarification, I want to tell you, no uh, country can be a member of the IOC. Neeta Ambani is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Neeta Ambani is the member of the IOC. Priyanka Chopra, somebody just said Priyanka Chopra, who is the Iggy Chop's fan here. Asim, I think did this happen very recently? Because I don't know about this. That Priyanka Chopra is also a member of the IOC. Okay. But I think she's not. She might be a brand ambassador of something in the IOC, which I'm not very sure of. But Neeta Ambani for sure is a member of the IOC. You also have Raja Randhir Singh, who's an honorary member of the IOC. He comes from a very affluent family of Punjab, if I remember correctly. He was also a shooter for India in the Commonwealth Games, which happened in the 1960s somewhere. And Narendra Batra, who's the head of the Indian Olympic Association, I don't know if he still is the head, he's also a member of the IOC. So please remember that no country can be a part of it. A natural person can only be a member of the IOC. You've got registered National Olympic Committees under the IOC, but that does not make you a member. Another very, very important aspect of of membership is that Neeta Ambani is not representing India in the IOC. Please be very clear about it. She's actually representing the International Olympic Committee in India. It's the other way around. So Raja Randhir Singh or Neeta Ambani or Narendra Batra are not Indian representatives at the IOC, but they're actually IOC representatives in India. So be very clear about these things. It's a very interesting things that are there. People have wrong perceptions about it, but it's great that we are having these conversations because that's how the system functions. All right. Any other input that anybody wants to give about the IOC? If not, then we'll go to our major part of discussion because we have some 45 minutes left and I want to dedicate more to those aspects. Anything about the IOC anybody wants to talk about or any clarity anybody wants to take on any aspect of it? Till then, I'll sip some water. Anything that anybody wants to talk about? All right. Is FIFA also recognized by the IOC? It's a body under the IOC for sure. It's an international federation which is under the IOC, and the IOC also regulates it. It has all these FIBA, FIFA, any Olympic sport. The international federation is the part of what we sometimes call the Olympic movement, right? So the Olympic movement is all these members are there. Which is FIFA, any international federation, the Olympic Committee itself, and so on and so forth. How many games become a part of the IOC? I don't have the exact how games become a part. I'm sorry. How games become a part of Olympics. I think they've made a committee for it, Abhishek, I remember correctly. And, it has to be a popular sport. You should have some some amount of countries playing it. They've got their own steering committee, which takes care of these matters and so on and so forth. But I don't know the exact process, but, as we say in Hindi, mota, this is how, it functions. IOC power to disallow certain nationals from participating under certain flags. If you can unmute yourself and how the members are selected. Now, that's a great question. I'll just come back to you, Anithram. I think first Aditendra question, I think is a very, very important one. Aditendra, that's a great question, by the way, that how are these members selected? And there's a lot of lobbying and politics involved in this. Now, I'll give you an example. If this is something that you can do. I think there are right now 102 or 103 members in the IOC. And if you open the list of these members, most of them will be His Excellency, Her Excellency, or state heads or people coming from very affluent families from particular countries and so on and so forth. Let's take Neeta Ambani for that for an example. Or she comes from a very well-known, very powerful family in India. That's the Ambanis. And there is no problem with that. I'll tell you the reason why. Because playing sport and governing sports are two different aspects, because when you govern sports, there are a number of other aspects associated to it, right? And when you get there in the membership, you need people who can influence this whole committee and so on and so forth. But a lot of athletes, and I'm with them on this, have reservations about this because of this, you don't get adequate athlete representation in the membership. Now, though there are a number of members who are there who have represented their countries in particular Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games and so on and so forth, but they're mostly there because they come from a particular background. So that's what I'm saying. The lobbying, the whole politics behind it is there, and there are a number of discussions every now and then regarding the whole the politicization of sport governing bodies and so on and so forth. So your background really matters when it comes to selection processes in the IOC membership. If I could answer your question, Aditendra.
Yes, sir. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Is IOC a private body? It's a not-for-profit body. Private body, I think in a lot of things you can call it, but it's actually an autonomous body, Sheetal, which derives its powers because now a lot of countries have signed the charter, and it derives its power from countries who think that there should be a governing body out there who has who's autonomous in nature and so on and so forth. So that would be a better way of calling it. I don't know if private body will be the last. There will be a correct word for it. One more. This was very interesting. Anitharam, if you can just unmute yourself and tell us about what you mean about IOC's power to disallow certain nationals for participating under certain flags. If you can please unmute yourself. I didn't get the question there.
Sir, IOC sometimes in case of war or something, IOC can suspend certain nations, and therefore the athletes from these nations should participate from a neutral flag.
Absolutely, they can. They have done it before. They can't then participate under their national flag. They participate under the Olympic flag. It happened when the Russian doping scandal happened a few years back, where a number of athletes from Russia were banned to participate because of prohibited drugs in their bodies, and only a few could. Or Russia as a country was banned from the Olympics, and only a few athletes could participate, but they participated under the Olympic flag. So that is how it's done, if that was your question.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the interesting policies is to let down refugee team participate in Olympics. Oh, George, please, if you can unmute yourself and tell us about that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the recent Olympics, the refugee teams have been given the rights to participate in the Olympics.
If you can just give an example of refugee teams.
They've been located due to different circumstances, especially a lot of refugees come from Germany. Yeah, I think the refugee teams, I don't exactly remember. I remember a couple of athletes from Syria went on to win medals in the Olympics in the recent past as well.
Right. Perfect. There is one more question, I think, which came. Sir, how the personal politics prerogatives of individual member played the working of the IOC? Let me take this question in the end. That's a good point. Let me just very quickly go to our.
I just adding to that point as well. Yeah, as I was saying, I think for 2024 Olympics, the Kurdistan natives who were part of refugees are invited as well as the refugee team.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to get into that. That's a good point. Let's very quickly move to, because we have just half an hour or so for our discussion. Let's very quickly go to our main point. Now, what has happened is that IOC has a number of commissions, and one of the most important commissions that IOC has come up with is called the IOC's Athlete Commission, right? And because this commission is very important for a discussion, because of the reason that they came out with this declaration very, very recently, which talked about rights and responsibilities of sportsperson or athletes who are a part of the IOC. Let's go very quickly and first understand the whole structure, or not the structure, but the whole concept of this IOC Athletes Commission. Now, I want to take you back to this era of 1981, where Juan Antonio Samaranch wrote a letter to his successor, who was about to become the president of the IOC. His name is Thomas Bach, and he wrote a letter to him saying that the IOC has to make a commission which should represent athletes, because it's very, very important to take their inputs into account in the whole functioning of IOC. And because of this, in 1982, in Rome, the commission had its first meeting, where only 6 athletes were there who discussed 3 very important points. The first was against doping, how to fight against doping, which was plaguing the entire sporting ecosystem. The second was gender equality, which we've just mentioned by a number of people like Sheetal and Muskan. They spoke about gender equality and so on and so forth. And one of the most important aspects, which we just had a discussion about, which was keeping politics out of the whole Olympic scenario and so on and so forth. And what had happened was that, and Juan Antonio Samraj is also one of the person who advocated to have the court of arbitration for sport. So whenever you get an opportunity to read about the history of CAS, and Juan Antonio Samraj is one of the most important person there. And this commission, the IOC Athletes Commission, had two major responsibility. One was to empower athlete representation in decision-making process. And number two was to support athlete development, not only when they are in sports, but also when they're not playing sports, when, in their non-sporting career. And IOC has this whole unit which is called Athlete 365, which I think you can also, I've done a number of courses from Athlete 365, which they are free of cost. You just have to go there. There are courses on doping, there are courses on match manipulation, there are courses on ethical conduct and so on and so forth. And they're taught by former athletes and members of the IOC. And it's a great platform that IOC has created for athlete development. And that has happened through the IOC Athletes Commission. Now, what had happened in the commission was that there was a buzz at, because, and there were a number of bodies that were, I would say, that were taking care of rights and responsibilities of athletes. But what the IOC thought in 2017, because their new IOC strategy was coming into the picture, which was called the IOC Athlete Strategy, was coming into the picture. They said that let's use the IOC Athletes Commission and tell them to do this work and come out with this document where the rights and responsibilities of athletes should be put on paper, and how a particular athlete should behave on and off the career, and specifically when they're playing any kind of international sport, or even you can use these declarations, you can use these templates for grassroots athletes as well. And they came out with this document which is known as the Athletes' Rights and Responsibility Declaration, right? This declaration was first conceived in 2017, and the major goal of this declaration was to support athletes which are coming from any background, whether it's age, gender, nationality, that will not matter, but to have an athlete-driven set of rights and responsibilities within the Olympic movement. They thought that it's very important to hear what the athletes feel about a particular thing, and then take care of things when it comes to their rights and responsibility. So in 2017, what the IOC did through the IOC's Athlete Commission, they made a steering committee, right? And this steering committee had 20 athletes. Now, the responsibility of these 20 athletes was to take inputs from as many athletes who are participating in Olympic Games, and to make then a structure which will have the rights and responsibility on paper. And the brilliant part of this declaration is that there were 4,292 athletes who came from 190 countries and who were representing 120 plus sports around the globe. They gave their inputs for it. And the declaration was adopted in the 133rd IOC session, which happened in 2018 on 9th of October at Buenos Aires, which is in Argentina. And what they've done is they've made 12 rights and 10 responsibilities. And what we'll now do is we'll go one by one and we'll pick up some important rights and responsibilities. And you give me an example of, a particular instance that falls within that particular rights or responsibility. Let's go one by one. There's something that George has put on the chat. Let me just quickly see that, and then I'll move to the next slide. Just to go off topic, what are the thoughts on cricket coming back to Olympics after 128 years? George, I think when we'll keep the Q&A session, definitely I'm going to pick up this topic. That's a good topic to have. Let's see what everybody feels about it. Let's just quickly go through these rights and responsibilities or duties first, right? Perfect. Let's go one by one. Let's first take the rights, right? There are 12 rights. We're not going to discuss each and every one of them like in detail, but I just ask you if you can relate to a particular right. So you've got 4 rights on this particular slide, and then we'll just talk about it. There are 12 rights in total, just to tell everybody. So the first right says that you participate in sport and compete without any kind of discrimination. Let's not discuss it because we know about non-discriminatory practices and so on and so forth. Very important, which is the second right, is to have a clean sporting environment. And when you say clean sporting environment, there are 2 aspects associated to it. One is doping, and second one is competition manipulation. Anjana just said something on the chat, which is the Samiha Barwin case. Anjana, if you can just unmute yourself and tell me about that. The Samiha Barwin case.
Sure, sir. It has something related to the very first right that you spoke about. This particular athlete, she is a para athlete. So she has been subjected to both gender discrimination as well as discrimination of being able bodied and that of being a deaf athlete. So in this particular
happened
case,
in India or somewhere outside?
yeah. It happened in India, and in the year 2019, if I'm not wrong, the Madras High Court laid down guidelines which are to be adhered by the athletes who are participating in this para athletic competition. So in this particular case, Samiha Barwin had passed, or she had surpassed the eligible parameter for long jump in the national eligibility test. But after that, what happened was she was denied the opportunity to take part in the international Olympics that are exclusively for the para athletes. So the reason what they put forth was that she was the only female athlete who had surpassed the parameter, and the others being the male athletes. So the reason being a lone female athlete led to the discrimination that she was not able to participate in the international Olympics. So this particular athlete, she went to the court, and the Madras High Court has laid down guidelines that has to be followed, but it has not yet been enforced. It had just been like the guidelines, and it has not been yet enforced. That's what I am aware of.
Please share this news article, or if you have the order with you, Anjana. That's a very, very important aspect. I did not know about it. Thank you very much. That's a very good input. Thank you. The second one, if anybody has any instance to share when it comes to fight against doping and competition manipulation, India, international, anything that you want to take, that an athlete has a right to have a clear sporting environment, which also is a duty of an athlete as well. But any aspect, any case that you remember?
Lance Armstrong.
Anurag, if you can please repeat.
Lance Armstrong. I mean, it did not happen in Olympics, but that's the biggest doping case.
Okay, if you can tell us about the whole Lance Armstrong case.
So basically, Lance Armstrong.
Okay, let's do one thing. Anurag, let's do one thing. You keep this case with you for the responsibility part. All right, that's a very, very important case. That's a very good point, by the way. We'll come to the responsibility part where we'll talk about the Lance Armstrong case. A great point. All right. Let's very quickly go to the third point, which says about access to general information when it comes to competition-related matters, so on and so forth. Then it's about education. Athlete 365 does it. VADA learning portal does it, where you're taught about sporting-related matters, whether it's about how to have a clean body, not to use prohibited drugs, your conduct on and off the field, and so on and so forth. So that's another aspect of it. Let's very quickly move to the next slide. Very, very important aspect, again, legal in nature, which is the first point, which is about intellectual property, that you can generate income. You have a right that your intellectual property is protected, and the international sporting body has to take care of these matters. Any input on this? Any example of intellectual property in sport? Any athlete who has fought the whole battle of intellectual property in sport? Any idea?
If I may, it's not an Olympic case, but it's a very recent judgment.
Yeah, please tell me.
So during the Qatar World Cup, the Bet365 app, when it was giving betting predictions about the Danish team, Denmark team, so they were using the images of the players, and not only during the FIFA World Cup and for football, men's football and women's football, but also for other sports, they had used the biggest athletes from Denmark and their photos without permission. So the Danish court fined them around 20 million Danish currency.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's George here. So
George, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying about this is nothing to the Olympics, but I remember one of the baseball players called Craig Kimbrell. He had trademarked a throwing style for during the MLB as well. That's one of the initial trademark cases which had come in intellectual property on whether a sports move could be trademarked or not. So that's
that's a very, very good point. There was a discussion about Mahendra Singh Dhoni's helicopter shot as well. that should also be given to him. These are examples of it. Another very important example for people who follow football was this whole tweet of Zlatan Ibrahimovic and all these players at one point of time against EA Sports, that FIFA sells their image to EA Sports and generates income, and they don't take or they don't compensate players properly for the same. That was, I think, in 2019 or 18. If you can just go and check about this. Very important aspect. Fair and equal gender representation.
Bale, right?
Zlatan and Bale. Yeah, Gareth Bale. They put a tweet against FIFA saying that, Kylian Mbappe with image rights in France too. That's Shumanga. That's a very, very good point. Another very important right which a player has is fair and equal gender representation. And this is not only in terms of playing, ladies and gentlemen, but also when it comes to governance in sports. If there are a number, I don't want to name any federation here, but if you go to the website of various federations around the globe, and it's not a problem in India, it's a problem around the globe, where you'll see that you don't have adequate amount of gender representation for number of bodies that are there within a particular national sports federation or international sports federation. You will only have male members representing them. With the new gender coming in, with the third gender in place, now you have to even take care of them, which is extremely important. That queer representation is also there, female representation is also there. So that's one of the rights which this declaration talks about. Then again, very important aspect which has been a need of the hour is the mental and physical health when it comes to safe environment for a particular athlete. GNLU is slowly developing what we call is the Indian safe sports policy. We are working on it, and this is going to be the first safe sports policy that is going to come for Indian athletes, because it's very important to safeguard them. To this whole discussion of safe sports, please read about this, because this particular declaration emphasizes on mental and physical health of an athlete or any body for that matter. Right. Let's move ahead and take the last 4 or 5 rights that we have. Then we go to the responsibilities. One of the most important rights is that elected representative, athletes should represent in the Olympic movement, in the sporting organizations, and so on and so forth. Unethical behavior has to be reported, and there should be retaliation against it. Retaliation does not mean that you hit somebody, but proper recourse should be taken when any athlete has to go, through the unethical behavior that can happen. Privacy, including protection of personal information, is another right that an athlete has. Freedom of expression, again, very, very important. And Rule 50 of the IOC is something that is always debated upon when it comes to, freedom of expression. Anybody, you can quickly tell me what Rule 50 of the IOC is, of the Olympic Charter is, I'm sorry. Rule 50, which is always under the radar. Because of the nature of it. So essentially what Rule 50 says is that you can't use sporting events in only certain circumstances. You can't use sporting events to make political statements. And that's, where a lot of people have reservations about that. How do you define political statements? Because, generally these statements are also human rights violation, or these statements are to counter human rights violation. But there's a major debate about it, that you shouldn't use these platforms for political statements. The Black Lives Matters at one point of time, the Black Power salute way back in 1968 Olympic, or I don't remember the particular year, where you have this picture of 3 athletes, out of which 2 of them are black, and they raise their fist in the air. It's called the Black Power salute. Sharat Kamal versus Table Tennis Federation is a very, very important aspect of this, Anjana. We're going to come to that when we have the discussion in Q&A. And the last is the due process, which is, I think, the natural justice aspect of it. Very, very important, that whenever there is a problem, where there is a dispute, the athlete has the right to have a fair hearing, and the whole aspect of natural justice should be given to him or her. These were rights. Let's very quickly go to the duties, and then we'll open it for question and answers, because I think the next speaker will come by 4:30, so I don't want to take his time from the schedule. Now, these are the duties which we have, and one of the most important duty, I think we'll just straight away go to the most important aspects of this. Was Rule 50. I think there was one on, yes, the second duty. And now I think I want Anurag to come in and talk about the Lance Armstrong case, where you need to have a duty to promote clean sport, which should be not included when it comes to doping issues, and also should not have, you shouldn't be manipulating competitions. Anurag, if you could just tell us very quickly about the Lance Armstrong case.
So Lance Armstrong in 98, 99, he recovered from cancer and Tour de France, which is considered to be the most challenging and toughest cycling sport, if not of all sports. He wanted to make a comeback, but his body could not sustain it. So he took the drugs and he returned as seven-time continuous winner of the Tour de France. But in later years, then he just on an interview with Opera, he just realized that that was not the responsibility and that was not something that he meant to inculcate for the young people and just wanted to show that hard work is important. And he regretted taking all those drugs to win the seven Tour de France. And after that, his Tour de France were cancelled out, and then he gave a public apology saying that these are not the goals and principles that athletes should have.
Absolutely, that's a brilliant, and not only Lance Armstrong case, ladies and gentlemen. If you read about the history of WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, uh, it is based on such scenarios where TVM, which was one of the most celebrated cycle team in Tour de France, which is a cycling competition that happens in Europe, specifically in France, but also goes through a few bordering countries. WADA actually came because of such use of prohibited drugs that were happening, which was rampant in the late 90s around sporting circuits. And it was very important to have WADA because the next Olympics were coming in, and they thought that the IOC thought that we cannot enter Olympic Games with such kind of scenarios, and we need a body out there that has to be curbing this whole issue of doping that's happening in sport. There is a very important question that has come in. Why does WADA not take action in cricket, football? Football, it still does, Bhavishya. In cricket, the reason for not taking is because NADA does not, the National Anti-Doping Agency does not keep cricket within its ambit. So cricket, the BCCI has made a different body for it, which I think is a lab in Sweden, if I remember correctly. They send their samples there. And I think there was a major problem with Prithvi Shaw, and also, if I remember correctly, with Yusuf Pathan when it comes to anti-doping sanctions and so on and so forth, where Prithvi Shaw came. And again, there's another responsibility because the athlete, unfortunately, sometimes has to prove that they were innocent and so on and so forth. And in India, the problem is keeping in view the education system that we have, the background of an athlete, because they come from very humble backgrounds at a number of point of time. They really don't know how these structures function. In 2019-20, I did a small project on athlete legal education, where it's very important to tell athletes about these basic things as to what is prohibited substance and so on and so forth. A major problem is regarding the vernacularity. If you look at these courses, these modules that international bodies have made, they're in foreign languages, specifically English. And that's why people coming from very humble backgrounds, I'm talking about India, maybe, and I'm very sure other countries as well, they don't understand these templates. So it's very important to have this athlete legal education in vernacular languages. But your cricket part, which you've asked, football, they do. Cricket, the most important aspect with cricket is that BCCI has a different lab which takes care of it. It doesn't fall under NADA. There's a major fight between NADA, BCCI, ICC got into the picture, even IOC got into the picture when it comes to how BCCI is regulating the doping aspect of cricket. There's a very important, there are a number of articles that are there which speaks about this whole tussle between BCCI and the National Anti-Doping Agency. Do read about it. That's a very important part. Very important aspect with doping is match manipulation. Anybody, you can give me any example of sport fixing, match fixing? Because you shouldn't do that as an athlete. Any example, India or elsewhere?
Yeah, Hansi Crony in 2002.
One by one. Let's go one by one. Antira has said Hansi Crony. Somebody else just said Hansi Crony.
Yeah, that was me. I just said Hansi Crony 2002. The whole
Okay, perfect. Oh, but that's a match fixing aspect. This is very recent, not very recent one, but at a point of time, Rajasthan Royals and Chennai Super Kings. Shubhankar, if you can unmute yourself and tell us that.
Yes,
And
sir.
then I'll
It
come to
was
the Mohammad Amir case because somebody has put Mohammad Amir case as well. Yes.
yes, sir.
First, let's go with you, Shubhankar.
Yes, sir. So that match was a very important match for the qualifiers in the top four, but it
Right.
was a very fixing case until the last ball. It felt like something was off, and after the investigation, it was found out that players from both the sides were in match fixing scandal, and there was if I'm not wrong, a handkerchief on the backside of a bowler. So if he used to do that, so there was betting, and therefore it was seen that there was match fixing from both the teams actually. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And I think you'll be having Vidushpat Singhani as one of your speakers in the course. Do talk to Vidushpat sir about it because he was one of the secretaries of that commission, which was made the Mudgal Commission, which came into the picture after that. He was one of the parts of the Mudgal Commission. Please do ask him this question about the whole, the IPL match fixing and spot fixing problems that happened. Somebody spoke of Mohammad Amir and Mohammad Asif. If you can unmute yourself and quickly tell us about that.
Yes, sir. It's Bhavishek here. Advocate Bhavishek here. It was one of the matches where I think it was this match where he bowled a no ball, and it was way beyond the popping crease. That was the spot fixing, and same thing happened by the same done by the Rahul Chandra and Srisan by putting the power in the IPL matches. So even that was a spot fixing, and the match. And there was one more match. I just want to finish it, and it was happened. That's a match fixing in the UE local match where the second team got all out, and it was clear that the players was getting since they have received the money. So that was the case for the match fixing.
Okay, that's a great point, Bhavishek. Just very quickly, one more question to everybody. What's this difference between match fixing and spot fixing? Anybody who can quickly take me through the difference between match fixing and spot fixing?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can I, sir? Bhavishek.
Please go ahead.
Match fixing is where you, match fixing is where you like fix the whole match. Like what happened in India versus West Indies, where the match was fixed that we are going to play slow. Then Manoj Prabhakar scored the 100, and it came from the player that we are going to play a slow match. And there's one more match where Sachin won the match for India. He has no instruction, but Mohammad Azharuddin in that state in that time versus Australia, I think it was the final. So that was the match fixing. And spot fixing is when there's a match. I think the Ahmed bowled on the specific delivery bowled a no ball. So that is spot fixing means कि आपको एक specific delivery पे ये no ball डालनी है या white ball डालनी है. आपको वो आपके spot fixing हो जाती है.
Perfect. That's a good point, and I think we should break now because it's 4:15 already. I will send these PPTs. I just wanted to show you the rights and responsibilities that are there, which have come through the Athlete Commission's declaration, which is very, very important. It was absolutely a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to be here, to be a part of this course. Thank you very much. You can write to me on these two email IDs, and my number is also there, which also works on WhatsApp. Please feel free to reach out. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tarun, sir, for the wonderful interactive sessions with our participants. I really think that you would have exceeded their expectations from this module.
Thank you, Subramaniam sir. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to introduce you Mr. Utkarsh K. Mishra. He will be handling Sports Trade and Commerce module in our Sports Law in India course. So Mr. Utkarsh K. Mishra has been working as an assistant professor of law at Dharmashastra National Law University, Jabalpur, since its inception in 2018. So he has also worked as an assistant registrar research at the Center for Research and Planning, Secretariat of Chief Justice of India, Supreme Court of India, on deputation from DNLU in the session 2021-2022. During his term at the Supreme Court of India, he executed many research projects and assignments. He is an alumnus of NLU Odisha from where he completed BA Economics, LLB Honors. He pursued Masters in Law from National Law University, Jodhpur, with specialization in international trade and international investment laws, and is a recipient of Nani A. Palkhiwala Memorial Gold Medal and Milan Kumar Banerjee Gold Medal for academic excellence in the postgraduate studies. So he has qualified UGC NET and is currently pursuing his doctoral studies from Nalsa University of Law, Hyderabad, in the realm of international trade laws. Prior to joining DNLU, Utkarsh has worked as teaching associate at HPNLU Shimla and taught both UG and PG courses. He also worked at the Center for International Trade, Environment and Economics, which is also called as CUTS International in Jaipur, as a research associate, and has worked on many assignments for the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. He has many research publications, articles, which are indexed in Scopus, UGC Care, Hein Online, and so on, and also has book chapters to his credit. So his area of research and teaching include contract law, international trade law, legal theory, international investment laws, critical legal studies, and so on. So at DNLU Jabalpur, Mr. Utkarsh heads the Center for Studies in International Trade and International Investment Laws as the director and has executed many research projects and assignments. So he is also the course director for the upcoming WTO Chairs Program, Double Credit Course on International Investment Laws to be held at DNLU in collaboration with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. So I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Utkarsh in our course right now. So over to you, Mr. Utkarsh.
Thank you so much, Subramaniam, for such a detailed introduction. And without taking much time, I would like to start the discussion of this session. I have been asked to speak about sports, trade, and commerce. To all the participants who are actually interested in this course and who have registered for this particular course, I think by now you might have gotten an idea as to how this domain of law is so intricately connected to a lot of other domains, already established domains of law, be it domestic law or international law. And I think by now you might have also understood the economic significance of sports as a profession, in terms of its economic contribution, not only to national GDP of countries, but also to the global GDP of world at large. Before I take you to the core areas of how sports interacts with international trade and commerce as such, I'd like to begin an introduction wherein I would like to talk to you about two different aspects of sports. I was actually going through the list of the sessions and I found that I think you might have just done a session on sports contracts or maybe dispute resolution and contracts. And at least by now you might have an idea that sports transactions, they involve a great deal of contracts and they involve a great deal of private transactions, and private parties are mostly part of it. But when we talk about trade as such, when we talk about trade, international trade transactions, now international trade transactions are not always private in nature. They are not always between private parties. There are international trade transactions which are done by countries directly to the other countries. So you have private contractual transactions which are governed by those private contracts, and they are usually of the nature of international contracts. And then you also have those transactions in nature which are more regulatory, which involve more regulatory aspects of trade and sports, which are actually linked because of two governments entering into a deal with each other and sending goods for export or for import. So I think this, the very first distinction that you need to keep in mind is that when we are referring to private transactions in sports, which would involve obviously a lot of private clauses between two parties, it's usually a player or a club, and then there are several clauses which define their contractual relationships. Then we are referring to more private aspect of sports, which is governed by contract, which is governed by international commercial contract law. And I suppose that you are going to have sessions on those aspects very soon. But when we talk about countries entering into relationships with each other with respect to trade in sports, then we do not have those parties as private parties as such. We have countries negotiating on both the ends on certain goods and services in relation to sports. And that aspect of sports is actually more or less regulatory in nature. It defines the government's roles, defines the role of the nations with respect to international law. So that field of domain is something that I would like to talk to you all about. So I have distinguished between two types of regimes. One is transactional sports law, which concerns itself with uh, private international law, private contract law. And the other regime is regulatory sports law, which actually deals directly with international trade issues and the trade or import or export of sports goods and services. So, as I have said, if you can see, I think I've already mentioned them on my slide. You have transactional aspect and then you have regulatory aspect. So my discussion today focuses on the regulatory aspects of sports trade, where we are going to talk about the import and export of sports related goods and services. So I think it's not a rocket science to mention that sports do constitute a huge deal of economic contribution to countries nationally, domestically, as well as globally. So, I mean, there's no doubt that sports do contribute uh, to a great extent in economic growth and economic development of nations. And hence, that regulatory aspect of trade in sports has to be kept in mind because that is also governed in the realm of public international law, and we rather refer to it as public international trade law. The relevance of distinction between these two domains is something to be noted, I mean, very critically, because when you talk about private transactions in sports, you have private parties, you have dispute resolution methods which are more private in nature because you have private parties involved. I think you might have done the sessions on private contracts previously, at least some idea you have by now. But when we talk about dispute resolution and parties in regulatory aspects of sports trade, which is more regulatory, which is more public international trade law aspect, there the parties are essentially the governments. There the parties are essentially the different nations and different countries trading with each other. So, the relevance of this differentiation lies in the fact that you have the different parties, the nature of those parties is also different. The dispute resolution methods that are adopted for resolution of disputes are also different, and the impact that those dispute resolution systems create are also different. For instance, I can tell you that when we talk about trade law, one field where sports and international trade interfere, or you can say rather intersect with each other, is in the domain of WTO law. We refer to it as popularly as the law of World Trade Organization, or the international trade law, or the WTO law, wherein there is a specific dispute resolution mechanism where, if at all there is a country who has an issue with another country, they can initiate the disputes with other country in a very different fashion. I will be talking about the dispute resolution system with respect to sports trade law, specifically under the realm of WTO law, very shortly. But just to give you an introduction, as of now, since we are focusing more on the regulatory aspect of sports, we are talking mainly about import and export of goods and intellectual property. Three main domains where sports actually interacts with the WTO. Let's come to the. Uh, am I audible?
Yes, yes, Mr. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's come to the next part of it. Just a minute. Yeah. Now, you can see on the slide there, I've listed some so many agreements, I think some of which you might have heard, some of them you might not have. But this is just one small list of agreements which are very, very relevant for understanding how sports and trade interact. The very first agreement that actually establishes the law relating to international trade, and that is also applicable to international trade in sports, is the Marrakesh Agreement. It's popularly known as the Marrakesh Agreement establishing the WTO, and it lays down the basic rules, the grand norms of how trade is to be done between the countries, how countries have to cooperate with each other in conducting that trade, how sustainable development has to be kept in mind, how climate change issues have to be kept in mind, how the interests of least developed countries and developing countries have to be kept in mind. Because under the larger realm of WTO law or the trade law, developed countries already have a higher stake and they already are sitting on an upper pedestal as vis-a-vis the other set of nations. So that is the Marrakesh Agreement. But the very first, most important agreement that becomes very relevant to understand the issues of sports trade is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. That's popularly called the GATT Agreement. You might have heard about it. This is an agreement which basically regulates the issues of uh, reducing tariffs and in that way liberalizing trade. See, sports is something which we refer to it as an activity. We can call it as a recreational activity, and we sometimes also classify sports as as an activity which people love to do in their leisure time. So we will come to the definition of sports also, the legal definition of sports and trade, specifically in the context. But in respect of sports, usually the sports which are traded amongst the countries. It can be apparels, it can be sports shoes, sneakers, socks, other sort of apparels which the sports persons wear and they would demand. And it's not only those obviously goods which is sports persons wear, it is also those goods which are sold in the name of so many popular clubs and with all their trademark rights intact. All that comes under General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Secondly, there is an exchange of services. I think you might have at least read or heard about uh, corporations and private entities coming to India, setting up agencies in India, institutions in India, and starting up training institutions for sports. There are exchange of services happening between countries, and India's, let's say for example, India imports certain training services from countries like US or from countries of Europe to come to India and then train our sports person. Even that is a trade, and that is referred to as trade in services. Even though trade in services is not covered under GATT, but there is a separate agreement called General Agreement on Trade in Services, and trade in services is covered in that particular agreement. So, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade is mainly about reducing tariff barriers. So tariff barriers are basically those costs, additional costs, and additional amounts which the importing and the exporting countries have to pay at the time of import and export. So there can be import tariffs also. Mostly it is in the cases of import that whenever a product enters your local market. So at the time when the product is crossing your border, at the time when the product is crossing your customs territory, it has to undergo a lot of charges, cess, and taxes of several kind. Usually we do not use this term taxes in terms of trade, because a tax is an amount which is usually put on a product when it is already entered the local market, domestic market. So we refer to different sort of taxes. We have GSTs, and we have CGST, we have SGST, and then we have different sort of other cess and charges which are applied domestically. So tariffs is a term which is referred to those amounts which are put on the products when the product is actually crossing the customs territory. So the idea behind the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade is to reduce those tariffs and to liberalize trade as much as possible. So, I mean, that's the main concern of General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Although this GATT agreement is very, very detailed, it has so many other provisions. I will also take you to the basic principles of GATT, which also inform the sports trade in India and abroad. But before that, I will also introduce you to the other agreements which I've mentioned. Then there is this agreement on agriculture. Agreement on agriculture is a very, very important agreement under the WTO regime, and it also intersects with the sports trade internationally, because lot of products are, which are used or which are traded in sports industry are agriculturally produced products. So obviously, I mean, they are not every product is very uh, it doesn't really get traded. Not every product gets traded always in its finished form. Sometimes we have intermediary products also, so trade in intermediary products and services also takes place. So there are so many types of products which are traded and which are you know curled out of the agricultural activities which is happening in several countries. The idea of an agreement to agriculture under WTO was to actually liberalize the trade of agricultural produces, because there's one very important aspect with respect to agriculture, and that is the idea of subsidies, which usually countries use as instrument of domestic protection of their local industries. I mean, this has been issue in most of the countries, and that is why agreement of agriculture has always been at the forefront of controversies. And even till date, there developing countries are working on the implementation of agriculture agreement on agriculture, which basically prohibits certain types of subsidies, so that the imported sports products, they do not face a negative competition with the locally produced sports goods or services. So obviously, I mean, that is one very important aspect of agreement of agriculture, which I think one should know. Then the third very important agreement on which creates an intersection between trade and sports is the SPS and TBT agreements. Are very, very important because uh, right now trade is obviously, as we know, that trade of import or export of goods and services abroad is going to stay forever. It's going to stay, it's here to stay, and there will always be demand for goods, there will always be demand for services. But with the passage of time and with the development of consumer protection laws, with the development of uh, you know uh, awareness about consumer rights, it's not just the goods, quality of the goods which actually satisfy the. It's also the quality of the goods applied to the end consumer for consumption, and that consumption can be of several types. It can be consumption for food, it can be consumption for general usage, it can be consumption for general peaceful possession of a particular goods or a commodity. So many a times it happens that a country is importing a particular goods or a particular product from another country, and through that product there is also a transfer of certain pests, certain diseases, as a result of which there is a direct possibility of endangering the life of animals, human beings, plant life, and life in general. So, SPS and TBT measures. SPS refers to sanitary and phytosanitary measures. TBT refers to technical barriers to trade. Both these agreements are very, very important because they regulate this safety aspect of sports goods. So if India is importing certain sports goods from other countries, as I said, sports goods and services can be of so many kinds. One of the example can be a sneaker, or it can be just a shoe, sports shoe, which India is importing, which is used by the players, which is used by the trainees. Even that needs to fulfill the requirements of SPS and TBT agreements. The SPS agreement is usually concerned about, mostly it is concerned about food safety. So sometimes what happens is there are products which are related to certain sports, and they do bear the goodwill of certain sports companies. They are also traded,
They are also exported and imported into several markets, and they also will have to be undergoing the regulations of SPS agreement. TBT is technical barriers to trade, which is more or less about the certification procedures and more or less about the technical requirements which a particular product will have to fulfill while entering a domestic market. So, I mean, this standard regulation is the main exercise that is done by these SPS and TBT measures. See, the idea is that sports economy is such a big economy that nowadays it has become very, as I said, it's become very immaterial uh, to actually export or import on the basis of quantity considerations. Any country can actually import as many as products possible, but what is more important and what is becoming more difficult for countries is to be able to import and export safe products which are standardized in nature, which have received international standard certifications. So Codex Alimentarius is one of the commission, and then there are several international standards which are also applicable on those sports products as well. And the sports products, when traded, they will have to keep in mind the conditions of these standards and safety. Another agreement is agreement on textiles. See, has very recently phased out, but at one point of time, under the agreement of textiles, countries were allowed to actually put import quotas. So import quota is like, for example, it's almost like a quantitative restriction. So you put a quota on the quantity of the particular imported product, and you say that I will not import more than that. You put quantitative restrictions on a particular product being imported from country X and not from Y. There were so many issues with respect to import quotas and import substitution policies of India at the time of LPG reforms, as a result of which so many developing countries, they got transition period under the agreement on textiles, and some period was given to these developing and least developing countries to abolish basically the import quotas. And once those import quotas were abolished, the agreement on textiles was to be fully integrated into the GATT agreement. So that is what has happened. Because most of the import quotas have now been abolished, this agreement has been integrated into GATT, and agreement on textiles no longer exists. But textile industry is also one very, very important industry which is catering to the sports business all across the globe. So as I said, you have agreement on agriculture, which basically regulates agriculturally produced products. Similarly, textiles industry, which used to refer to the textile products, the clothing with respect to the different types of clothings which are required and which are worn by the sports players, the jerseys, the material of those clothings, etc. That was all governed by agreement on textiles, along with SPS and TBT agreement, and then GATT. So it's not that only one of the agreements applies to the trade of a sports good. It's important to understand that there is a multiplicity of trade agreements which apply on the import and export of trade goods at the same point of time. Then a very, very important aspect of one of the covered agreements. In the title, I've used the word covered agreements. So when I say covered agreements, I mean to refer to all the annexed agreements which are part of the main Marrakesh agreement. So there is a parent agreement called Marrakesh, and then to Marrakesh there are annexed so many other agreements with respect to different issues. I have listed some of the very important agreements which directly concern trade in sports. Is, as I said, the general agreement on trade in services. Now, trade in services is something which is currently being negotiated to a great extent under the WTO regime, and its services can be of several types. So, as I said, uh, if there is a training academy being opened by a foreign company in India, and certain foreign scholars are coming to India to train, then they are basically coming to provide educational services or services of training. That can be sports training academy as well. that will also come under, that may also come under the general agreement on trade in services. It has to qualify as other services. So you do have lot of kind of services which are being covered under the GATS agreement. So the only difference between GATT and GATS is that, number one, GATS, GATS, General Agreement on Trade and Services, is only about services. And the second differentiation is that GATT is more extensive and more elaborate in terms of exceptions being provided to countries with respect to trade in goods. So as of now, there is a huge discussion happening at the WTO level to reform the General Agreement on Trade and Services so that we can actually make it more inclusive, more elaborate, more inclusive of countries' expectations. And I think you might understand or you might know that India is also one of the top players, and India does also participate in sports. To be very frank about it. So, I mean, this agreement is yet to be amended, but as of now, trade in services of sports is being governed by GATS only. Next is there basically the next set of agreements which are relevant for us to understand our agreements on anti-dumping, subsidies, and safeguards. Now, these are the three agreements. They're not single agreement. This is not the name of a single agreement, but this is, I have written them together because they, most of these three agreements, they are basically protectionist measures in some way. They are basically measures which are allowed to the member countries of the WTO if they want to protect their domestic industry. So there are several cases where India has initiated anti-dumping investigations against China. So anti-dumping agreement basically refers to an agreement which abolishes or which kind of discourages dumping. So you know that you might have read competition law. If you have not read, but at least heard about what competition law does. The idea of these three agreements, anti-dumping, agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures, and the agreement on safeguards, is basically to create fair, competitive market practices for both imported sports product and the locally produced sports product. So anti-dumping basically tries to discourage dumping of product. Dumping का मतलब simple terms में ये होता है कि when a particular country basically exports a particular product at a cost lesser than the cost at which it is basically marketing that product in its own country, in its own domestic country, then that refers to dumping. So basically, you are trying to dump a domestically produced product into the domestic industry of another country at very lower cost. Please excuse me. And if you do so, what happens is, since the cost of the imported product is already very less, it is not facing any good competition from the domestically produced products. It is actually the domestically produced products which face lot of competition from the imported goods, and as a result of which there is an issue of unfair competition. So sorry, excuse me, I have a sore throat today. This is what the agreement of anti-dumping does in relation to sports goods. The second agreement is the agreement on subsidies. As I said, agreement on agriculture was one of the agreements which used to produce, which basically prohibited certain kinds of subsidies. And subsidies are very important policy instruments. You see, even if India keeps on increasing its trading patterns and its economies of scale and scope, and increases its import and export, still Indian government will try to create opportunities for its locally produced products, and that is also applicable for sports products which are domestically produced. And one of the policy instruments to create better competitive environment and easy environment for trade is subsidies. So you give subsidies to your domestically produced products, and obviously their costs become less, and obviously the consumer would choose a less quality product if the product between which he or she has to choose. They are of the same quality, they are like products. So if the quality of the two products is same and the cost of one of the products is lower, it is general consumer tendency that he is going to choose the product with a lesser cost. So that is something what is prohibited, the uh, very I would like to say a very broad idea of agreement on subsidies. And then the third agreement, very important, is agreement on safeguards, which basically prevents a very you can say uh, unnecessary outflow of imports. See, because it's very important to import goods and services to your country, and any country would like to import as many as goods possible so as to satisfy the needs of their consumers. But sometimes what happens is that your imports become so much than the exports that it culminates into a balance of payment crisis. And balance of payment crisis becomes, so it's like this, that you are spending more and your profit is very less. You are exporting less and you are importing more. And sometimes what happens is you are importing too much to an extent that it has started harming your local industry also. So in that case, the agreement on safeguards basically allows the countries to take safeguard measures. And those measures are also in the form of putting higher tariffs. आप import के ऊपर higher tariff लगा देंगे. So sports products जो भी आप import कर रहे हैं, you put higher tariffs on those products, and those measures are called safeguard measures. So you see, this is how, in a very wider sense of an explanation of how WTO interacts with sports and specifically the trade of sports goods and services, I think that I have tried to cover in this particular discussion. And then there is obviously trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. As I said, that when a product is traded, the intellectual properties of various kinds are also traded. I would not like to take discuss trips here, because it is, I see that there is a specific session which is dedicated to intellectual property. Hopefully the expert will be talking about it. I would like to focus more about trade in goods and trade in services, and that's the core discussion of my session today here. Now, coming to the next part, just a minute. Yeah, important principles. I think this is something which needs to be understood to a great deal, because these are the three main pillars of international trade, which also impact the trade of sports to a great extent. The first principle is the principle of non-discrimination, which is further classified into two more principles, which are MFN and national treatment. See, non-discrimination basically refers to the principle of equality. Now, what does it say is that, let's say if India is basically trading with country X and country Y, if it is giving any sort of concession, if it is giving any sort of advantage to country X, then India needs to give the same concession or advantage to country Y with respect to that particular product, with respect to that particular goods. That is the principle of most favored nation, or in short form, we call it MFN. It's a principle of equality. So that was the aim of WTO at large, that you wanted to create a regime which is more equality based so that trade can be liberalized easily. Because there were so many countries out there who had closed their economies for so long time. China became a WTO member very later point of its time, because there were obviously disputes within uh, the legal setup of China as a separate state entity, because now you have People's Republic of China, and then you have Republic of China, you have China, and you have Chinese Taipei. So China was already facing the issue of governance, and then because of China following the policies of state trading enterprises and its policies being derived from a Maoist regime which actually did not believe in opening up of economic sectors. lot of countries were facing discriminatory treatment in terms of trade in goods from China and other similar countries. So, and obviously, which was not very fruitful for trade at global level. So, ultimately, the purpose of this non-discrimination was principle was to abolish that sort of inequality. Sorry. So, MFN treatment basically, or MFN principle basically talks about a principle of equality wherein if you are giving a particular advantage or a concession to one or any sort of benefit to one country with respect to one particular product, then with respect to the same product or the same goods, you have to extend the same advantage or same concession or same benefit to all other countries. That's the idea of most favored nation. Then the other non-discrimination principle is national treatment. Now, national treatment is something which is very, very important, and it becomes more. It's very often used in trade disputes, specifically in sports also. National treatment basically refers to an idea wherein if you are importing a particular goods or if you are importing a particular service into your domestic country, then if you are applying any sort of taxes, if you are treating that particular service or a good which is imported, which is a foreign, or you can say foreign produced product or a service, then that treatment should be same as that of the locally produced goods or service. So if you are putting a higher tax, if you are putting a very higher discriminatory taxation regime on an imported goods, imported services, then and you are putting a lesser tax on a like product or a like service under the which has been locally produced in your country, then that's a violation of national treatment. So national treatment principle basically tries to ensure equality when a foreign product enters a local market. However, most favored nation treatment principle basically tries to ensure equality at global level where it's more regulatory in nature, it is more global in nature, the principle of MFN. But these two, MFN and national treatment, have been the pillars of WTO and specifically trade in sports since 1994. And even before that, in fact, when the GATT, the very first treaty on trade in goods came into being, that was 1947. So since 1940s, MFN and national treatment have been part of trading community at large. And in fact, even before 1940s, when international trade regime of be it in with respect to sports or be it with respect to any other goods was not really codified, and it was only through by way of investments and bilateral investment treaties that the countries were interacting with each other. Even then, MFN and national treatment were present. Next important principle is market access. It's very, very important once again. Market access refers to the idea of providing easy and smooth access to a foreign produced product into the local market of other country. So let's say if I am, let's say India is producing sports shoes of a particular kind for sports players in, and then there are so many private players in India which are doing that sort of production, they are manufacturing, and then India is exporting those products as well. At the same time, India is importing those particular products to the India's local economy. Then to what extent can India make this market access of foreign product easy is the larger question under market access. And how do you ensure that? So since we are talking about goods and we are talking about services, with respect to goods, again, as I said, you need to reduce tariffs. So ultimately, the whole idea of WTO law has to reduce tariffs. So now tariffs have been reduced to be just a mere formality because they are just nominal charges which are put on the imported products as custom barriers. But almost all the countries have reduced tariffs now. I think they're only very few countries apart from those member countries which are not part of the WTO have not reduced tariffs. But almost all countries, because currently you have 164 countries which are part of the member of the WTO. Latest country to join is very is Afghanistan also, and then there are so many other countries which have initially not opened their economy and now they have agreed to the WTO rules. They have also reduced all their tariffs. But how do they reduce the tariffs? How is that market access given is a larger question. So with respect to goods, जब sports goods की बात हो रही होगी, जैसे कि मैंने आपको example दिया that when we are talking about import of, let's say, sports shoes or sports equipments which are largely considered as goods, then you give market access by creating tariff bindings. So it is called tariff binding. By means of tariff binding, I mean to say that basically you say that I will put a tariff on a particular product at the time when the product crosses my customs barrier and enters into my local market. But that tariff will not increase over a period of time. So that is called a bound rate of tariff. That is called a tariff binding. And that has been given by almost all the countries of WTO, all 164 member countries of the WTO in their schedule of commitments. So that market reduction of tariffs and through binding tariffs has been given by schedule of commitments, and that every country has given when it has signed these covered agreements. So it is usually annexed with GATT agreement because we're talking about trade in goods. So that is called tariff bindings. And then tariff bindings also emphasize the fact that you cannot charge more tariffs beyond the rate which you have already committed. So under WTO, every country needs to make commitments to all other countries, wherein the countries will say that, okay, I am committing that I will not charge a tariff more than this on like products from all countries. So this market access has to be provided on MFN basis. So you cannot say that my tariff banding for a sports shoe originating from China is this much, 15 rupees, and my tariff banding for a sports shoe originating from countries of European Union is 20 rupees. No, market access has to be based on MFN and national treatment. So all these principles are interconnected and they are related to each other. The second term which you can see here, I will highlight also for your clarity. I have used a term called sectors. I have just highlighted it on slide. I've used a term called sectors. I refer to sectors basically to refer to services. Because in services, you cannot put tariffs, like because services are traded in a very in a form which cannot be taxed directly at the borders. Sometimes what happens is if those services involve, you know, a more physical disposition of property, then to that extent you will charge tariffs. But then ultimately they will also be covered under goods. Services are usually traded in a way where one person or one commodity or one particular country is basically the private player of one country is basically going to another country and providing some sort of services. Now those sort of services can be of several kinds, and the trade in services agreement talks about those some 3-4 types of services, and I will read it for you. So there is mode 1 type of service, that is called the cross border supply of services, wherein services are supplied from one country to another. So for example, international telephone calls, that is also a service of a kind. Mode 2 type of service is a consumption abroad. So where consumers or firms are making use of a service sector in another country. Mode 3 is basically about commercial presence. So for example, a foreign company X, which is situated in United States and it has a subsidiary located in India. So through that is a commercial presence, but that is also a service that will not be counted in GATT agreement. That will be counted in GATT's agreement. And then fourth is presence of natural persons. That is very, very important. As I said, educational services being provided with respect to sports training facilities. अगर इंडिया में आज की डेट में कोई ऐसी कंपनी, एक फॉरेन कंपनी आकर के यहाँ पे स्पोर्ट्स ट्रेनिंग एकेडमी एस्टैब्लिश करती है, एंड देन ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ दैट स्पोर्ट्स ट्रेनिंग एकेडमी देयर इज अ ट्रैवल ऑफ certain sports professionals, experts who are coming to India, delivering lectures, and not only delivering lectures, but also training our sports persons. They are said to be delivering services. They are not said to be delivering goods. So for them, market access is not by reducing tariffs, because that's not possible. For them, market access is provided by actually, again, creating a schedule of commitments in which you clearly specify that which sectors you have opened for foreign investment. That is called market access with respect to services trade in sports. So let's say if I want to open, India wants to open FDI. I think, for example, you might have heard a lot and followed a lot about the debate of FDI in retail. And that became a huge discussion in India, foreign direct investment in retail market in India. Similarly, if let's say India wants to open up its market in educational services sector, then India will have to make the commitment under the GATS agreement that yes, I am opening my educational sector for services where a foreign entity or a foreign body or foreign private players can come and invest. So basically, services do involve an investment of a huge amount of money, so that they do add to a lot of GDP of the country where the services are being traded, and at the same time there are economies of scale and there are scope. So market access becomes very important and central element of the whole discussion and intersection between trade and sports. The third principle is very, very important, and that is trade facilitation. I think I'm running short of time also, and then we'll have to go for answer questions, but I will take maybe 5 more minutes. Will that be okay, Subramaniam? Will that be okay if I take time till 5:35?
Yes, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. So trade facilitation becomes another very, very huge issue. And again, just a minute. Yeah. Trade facilitation. The third aspect of the third aspect of important principles which govern the relationship between trade and sports is trade facilitation. Trade facilitation basically refers to making trade easier and smoother. So as I said that trade is here to stay, but I have been discussing with you a lot of agreements. I tried to give you a brief of those agreements where countries will try to implement their domestic policies because they want to not only protect their consumers, so they will try to improve the quality of the products, but at the same time, they will also try to protect their own domestic industry. So what happens is that if India is importing a particular product from China, let's say, and that product comes to the customs territory of India, that particular product has to undergo lot of procedures which basically create delay in terms of smooth trade. So those procedures can be filing of lot of documents. So there is no single window system in India. I mean, there are developing in single window systems in India, but I mean, I would be wrong if I say that India has in every aspect, in every port in India, every seaport, airport, or every land port in India has a single window system. No. So you have to file so many documents. There are different types of document of title to the goods which have to be signed. Then you have to send goods to buyer. Licensing procedures are also there which you have to. So for example, there is an agreement. Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you. Who is this? Yeah. Do you have a question? I think somebody had a question.
Sir, I unmuted the call by mistake.
All right.
So you may
Okay.
please.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. So I was saying that there is an agreement on import licensing under the WTO, basically wherein the agreement requires the country to clarify their import licensing procedures. अब किसी भी प्रोडक्ट का इंपोर्ट करना है तो आप ऐसे ही नहीं कर सकते. You have to basically have a license of that import, and that licensing procedure has to be time and again notified by the country. So those import licensing procedures at times are very complex. They take a lot of time, as a result of which lot of more costs get added to that particular trade. So for example, if I had to get a benefit of 15 rupees out of the export of a particular commodity, now I am because of the other costs, because I have to print so many documents, I have to file certain documents here, then I have to travel to other window, another customs office, and then I will have to make some fee payment of customs officials, etc. A lot of obviously red tapeism is there, corruption is there. So all those procedures are also not very clear, and that is what trade facilitation intends to do. And to basically effect this trade facilitation, there is an agreement on trade facilitation also, and that's the latest agreement which has joined the WTO as a covered agreement under WTO. Similarly, pre-shipment inspection is also one of the problems. Obviously, when a particular country is exporting a product to another country, or particular exporter is exporting a product to another importer, the importer would like to do or conduct pre-shipment inspection. So that sort of, if you have read Sale of Goods Act, somebody, if you might have read contract laws, then you would understand that under contract laws, domestic contract laws of India, a buyer has a compulsory right of examination of the goods which he buys under a contract of sale. And international trade, analogically, is nothing but a sale agreement. To be very, very widely speaking. So it's international trade is nothing but an international contract. So, analogically, the similar principles will also be applicable here. So, in order to properly appropriate the goods, to properly accept the goods, you will have to examine the goods. You will have to examine the goods in terms of their quantity, in terms of their quality, and that whole procedure is referred to as pre-shipment inspection. Those pre-shipment inspection procedures are also becoming cumbersome day by day, and the trade facilitation agreement, or the trade facilitation principle agenda behind the agreement, tries to reduce those procedures, tries to reduce those unwanted red tapeism which has seeped down into this trade and sports of goods and services. Then third is rules of origin. Sometimes I think you might have heard about these marks called made in India, made in China, made in Japan. And there are several products of sports which are traded with those marks, with those origin marks. What are the origin? Now, what happens is that, let's say if a particular sports jersey is imported from China, then it is not necessarily that that particular sports jersey is actually completely produced and manufactured in China itself. It is possible, it is very much possible in the today's day of global value chains, it is possible that the button of that shirt or a jersey, or it if at all there is, it is basically imported from any other country by the China, by China. Or if the raw material which is used to produce that particular jersey is imported by China from any other country. So usually what happens today is that a particular complicated product, or a final product today which is traded in most of the countries, is not produced or manufactured at just one place or a country. So at times what happens is that it becomes very difficult to identify what is the origin of that particular product, because if you do not know the origin of the product, you will not be able to actually give it market access. It will not help you to clarify the market access. It will also not help you to and also look for externalities. So knowing the origin of the product becomes very, very important to actually grant market access. If a product is coming from a non-WTO member, then India bound to really comply with needs and the principles which are established in the WTO, that becomes a question. That is why the origin of the particular product, knowing the origin of a particular product becomes very, very important. And those are the rules of origin which also are part of the larger agenda of trade facilitation. I will move to the next slide quickly because I have not much time left on my sleeves right now. This is one very, very interesting case which I found, and I thought I will just give you a brief of it so that you know that how trade in sports actually interacts with national and international legal systems. So this is a case called United States slash measures affecting the cross-border supply of gambling and betting services. Now in WTO, the case names are written like this. So it's the country which has complained or which has initiated a dispute resolution, that country's name does not appear in the case name. So only that country's name appears in the case name against whom the case has been initiated. So this particular case was initiated against United States because United States had taken certain measures which was affecting the cross-border supply of gambling and betting services. Now, who initiated this complaint? It was Antigua. So basically, Antigua initiated this complaint because United States, now Antigua was basically supplying gambling and betting services that you can supply services supplied in the form of goods, but they are supplied in the form of gambling and betting. These are recreational activities, and they will be traded in the form of recreational activities only. Now, gambling and betting can be supplied by commercial presence. There can be a corporation which is regulating or which is basically trading or which is doing the business of gambling and betting. There can be online and gambling and betting services which can be provided. So there are several ways in which you can trade gambling and betting services. Now what US did was, US basically did not provide, did not open. Now since it's a matter of services, the concerned agreement which is in focus is GATS, General Agreement of Trade and Services. So under the GATS agreement, as I said, you have to give market access. And market access, how you will give? You will have to actually, in a schedule of commitments, you have to specify the sector which you have opened for foreign investment. So if there is a cross-border supply of gambling and betting services, there is a foreign investment coming, no doubt. So what US did was, US said that Antigua basically complained that the cross-border supply of gambling and betting services from Antigua was receiving a differential treatment by the United States. And as I said that you have to give equal treatment to the foreign products and your local products if you have agreed to it in your schedule of commitments. Now US has stated that, look, gambling and betting are not sports. So basically they said that gambling and betting services or gambling and betting as an activity is not sports. Now, before I move on further, is there anyone who is present in this session and would like to maybe talk about whether gambling and betting is actually a sports activity, or what is it then? Can somebody maybe talk about it? Do you think gambling and betting is a sports activity? Anyone?
Can I, sir?
Yes, sure, please.
According to me, gambling and betting should not be considered as sporting activities because they rely on the factor of chance and not on the factor of skill. So, and this is the only thing which was also like when the fantasy games were challenged in the Supreme Court of India. It was also like they proved that the in those fantasy games there is more of a skill that is involved and less of the factor of chance is involved. So in that sense, gambling and betting should not be counted as sports.
All right. Okay. Your logic is, I understand, because you are, can I know your good name, please?
Yes, sir, Adarsh.
Yes. So Adarsh, basically you're depending upon a ruling of a national jurisdiction, or if I can say, you are depending upon a domestic rule to say that gambling and betting is not a sports activity. But that was something which was very, very significant in this particular decision, that US was saying that gambling and betting services are only recreational activities and we do not count it in sports. But the appellate body in the WTO, which was hearing this particular matter, they basically said that no, gambling and betting, they are sports activities. And if they are not core sports activities, they are at least related to sports activities. So why this decision becomes very, very important is, as of now in international trade, and with respect to trade in sports, we do not have a very clear definition of what sports would constitute. That is a gray area, which is something which is still very controversial. It is not yet answered. However, this is the only case as on date under the WTO regime which has actually talked about sports trade, and that too against United States. So this ruling was against United States, and the appellate body said that the supply of gambling and betting services has to be considered as a sports activity, and there is no clear justification of the United States government to not call it as a cross-border supply of to not call it as a sports activity. Just if I would like to basically share one more thing, I would like to take you to the original case. Let me just share my screen. Is this screen visible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see that this is a appellate body. So I'm not telling you as to what is an appellate body. I will just briefly tell you as that under WTO we have a panel, and then above panel there is a appellate body, basically a mechanism which hears appeals from a lower body. So that is in very brief what appellate body is. But then appellate body is the final body which gives the recommendations and which gives the reports and which are binding on the parties. Now, this is a case of United States affecting the cross-border supply of gambling services. I'll take you to the discussion on what the appellate body has to say. Paragraph number 165. Paragraph number 165 says that in this case, in examining definitions of sporting, the panel surveyed a variety of dictionaries and found a variety of definitions of the word. All of the dictionaries definitions cited by the panel define sporting as being connected to, in the sense of related to, suitable for, engaged in, or disposed to sports activities. Some definitions also define sporting as being connected to gambling or betting, but others do not. Of those that do, several note that the word is mainly used in the sense in the phrase of a sporting man. So, in paragraph number 165, what appellate body is trying to say is that the panel, that you can just say that the lower court basically said that betting and gambling are not sports activity. But then in paragraph number 166, appellate body clearly says that we have three reservations about the way in which the panel determined the ordinary meaning of the word sporting. First, to the extent that the panel's reasoning simply equates the ordinary meaning with the meaning of the words as defined in dictionary. This is, in our view, too mechanical an approach. So I'm not going to read the whole uh, paragraph here, but you can actually refer to this case, and I will also send this case to the organizers of the event. They can share it with you. If you read the whole appellate body report, they have classified gambling and betting as sports, and that makes it one of a very you can say most discussed dispute resolutions which have been done at WTO level with respect to sports. And the idea was that United States had in their schedule of commitments said that we are opening our market for all the sports activities, for foreign investment, and for cross border supply of investment. And the they had said this, and the US was not providing the same to Antigua. Antigua said that gambling and betting services will be part of sports, and the same was upheld by the appellate body in its report. So this particular dispute is very important, and it will actually take you to huge discussions about what is gambling and what is betting. Obviously, at national jurisdiction level, we have issues of gambling and betting because we see them as against public policy. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Adarsh, if you might have read about gambling and betting, you might have also come across, uh, you know, Indian courts saying that gambling and betting are prohibited in India because we also have a prohibition of Public Gambling Act, wherein all sorts of gambling and betting is prohibited. But then very recently, the Law Commission of India has also started working on developing a framework, legal framework on gambling and betting services. And most probably, some types of gambling and betting will be considered legal. So, I mean, the time will tell us to what will be the future nature of the legality of gambling and betting services in India. But yes, this is a dispute which you can refer to understand the intricacies of trade with respect to sports under the larger realm of international trade. Lastly, I think I would like to just tell you a very recent development, which I think has happened in the history of WTO, is that very recently FIFA and WTO, they have joined hands, and they have made uh, a statement that FIFA is basically trying on their part to create football as a means of creating global value chains. So football, as and there was, if you see this, there is a huge material available on the WTO website, and there are so many online conversations which are available, recorded conversations between the WTO Director General and the FIFA General. Uh, it's I'm forgetting name, head, but there are so many conversations right now, and you can see that the WTO and FIFA have agreed to actually start a program wherein football and football related products, now football, I'm referring to not only football as the football that we use, but football as a game. So when you talk about football as a game, we are referring to various sorts of goods with respect to the game of football, which are traded, be it the jerseys, be it the different equipments relating to football game, and then the services relating to football training. And the WTO has FIFA has basically requested the WTO to help them to basically also um, empower women and least developing countries to come forward and to produce locally, more and more locally produced domestic products in relation to the football games, and then put them in global value chains. So how can we integrate them? So it's actually the problem with the today's football trade is that most of the football trade is governed by big multinational corporations. So they do not have any problem in integrating in global value chains. They are already part of those value chains. So they're getting benefits of it. But how can we integrate our locals in global value? Something which has been really thought commendably well by FIFA very recently, and they want to initiate that sort of integration by including local women. So, for example, there is in India, we our tribal population does a lot of uh, domestic production of tribal products, but they do not necessarily get integrated in global value chains. They are able to sell those products only in the local markets and in the bazaar huts, and not in malls, not in big bazaar, right? Similarly, there are so many countries are well versed, which are very good in producing certain type of textiles. For example, cotton four countries. I hope you might have heard about C4 countries, cotton four countries. So amongst the cotton four countries are, I think, Chad is one of them. Burkina Faso is there. I can remember of Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali is there, Benin is there. So these 4 5 countries, C4 countries, they are called cotton four countries, and they are so well in the production of cotton, but still they are classified as least developed countries because of their whole economic status. And because of the least economic status, they are not able to integrate their local producers in global value chain, as a result of which they're not getting the they're not reaping the benefits of a global trade. So this was this is a very recent contribution of FIFA and very recent collaboration of FIFA with WTO as to how to integrate football in global value chains. And I would like to leave you all with this food for thought today as to how can you, as a researcher of sports law, try to think not only from the point of view of football as a game, but other sports like cricket, hockey, and any other forms of sports, and how India can basically contribute and bring its manufacturers who are local manufacturers and still producing very good quality products and help them integrate their products in global value chains. So this can be a very good research, and it can also initiate some very good practice points as well. I think I have already exceeded my time. I would like to end my discussion here, and I would like to open the house for any questions. Yes, any questions by any of the participants?
Yes.
Yes.
So the forum is now open for question and answers. If there are any questions, you can raise your hands or you can unmute yourself and ask.
I can see some questions in the chat box. So there is one person called Bhavishya Mehra. The participant named Bhavish Mehra is asking, what is the position of sports persons and sports bodies in treaties and agreement made between two countries in WTO? So sports bodies, mainly they are not, as I said, sports bodies, they are not the direct players under WTO. Since WTO is more regulatory aspect of sports trade, the private parties are not involved in dispute resolution. So even if there is a private exporter from China and is exporting certain sports shoes to India, and there is a issue of any with respect to any sort of taxes, with respect to custom barriers, with respect to tariffs, with respect to non-tariff barriers, it is China and India who will have to come to WTO and sort it out between them. So the position of sports persons and sports bodies as on date, I mean, they cannot participate in the dispute resolution process, at least under the WTO. So under WTO, it is only the countries. I hope, Bhavishya, I have answered your question. Then judgment of this case, I will send the judgment to the organizers. You can get it from them. Thank you, Bhavishya, for your good question. Any other question?
Hi, sir. My name is George, and I have a question to you. Is that so? You did speak about the SPS agreement, right? So I just have a question on whether has there been any instances where the SPS agreement has been put in place and the sports goods was prohibited from coming into the country?
Yeah. So there is no question of prohibition as of now. I mean, we do not prohibit goods. There is no possibility of putting import embargoes, as of now. So because we have already liberalized our trade regime globally. So at max, what can be done is to put higher tariffs if there is an issue of safeguards, if imports have become higher. But as of now, I do not see any particular trade dispute reaching that level under WTO, where any particular sports goods were put to such certain import restrictions. But generally, import restrictions have been put on sports apparels. That has happened. So apparels, so many restrictions have been put on sports apparels because, and that too under so many different agreements, including these standards agreements as well, but not complete prohibition.
Thank you for that question. So I just have one more question to add to it. It's more related to trade-related investment. So we've seen how when global events take place, for example, there'll be the World Cup or there'll be any league which takes place across the world, especially the World Cup and the Olympics. We know there are companies or there are big multinational companies who go for trade-related investments in that particular country for that particular period of time. Now, what is the long-term sustainability of such investment, especially when it comes to after that event? Now we have seen multiple times after a major event, the country does go through major losses as well. So isn't that just contrary to investment as well? Because do they just pull out the investment after the event, or is there a sustainability model to that?
So yeah, the sustainability model is actually that comes in the form of restrictions and the various regulatory devices, I would say. See, ultimately, investment is comes with a risk. I hope you do understand that be it a short-term investment or a long-term investment, there is always a risk attached to it. And specifically in the case of international investments, it's the host country's conditions which have to be fulfilled by the investor. So it's always the host country which puts those conditions, and with that risk that this investment might not work. So ultimately, the only sustainability in that investment which is available to the host country is those conditions, and that is regulated by bilateral investment treaties, mostly by bilateral investment treaties.
Thank you for that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Participants, are there any other questions? Or if not, we can.
All right, I think we'll call it a day for this session. Thank you so much for such a patient hearing. I hope this session was useful, although 1 hour is not sufficient to talk about trade, but I hope I was able to at least expose you to some of the important issues. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mr. Utkarsh. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Utkarsh for delivering a captivating lecture on our sports law in India course, focusing on the module of sports, trade, and commerce. So he has expertly navigated through the complex topics such as the Marrakesh Treaty agreements and the general agreements on tariffs and trade and the crucial principles of non-discrimination, market access, and trade facilitation. Your insights have enriched our understanding of the intricate relationship between sports and commerce, and we are really grateful for your valuable contributions. Thank you so much for being part of this course, Mr. Utkarsh.
Thank you so much, Subramaniam, for your invitation. I would also like to take this moment to thank my colleague and dear friend, Professor Abhishek Negi, who invited me to deliver a session of my own interest. And I wish all the participants all the best for their future sessions. Thank you, Subramaniam, for your such a wonderful being such a wonderful host. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Dear participants, I'm happy to welcome our final speaker of the day, Mr. Abhishek Negi. Mr. Abhishek Negi is an accomplished academician and legal expert. He currently serves as an assistant professor of law at Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, and also holds a position as a visiting faculty of law at Bombay Stock Exchange, where he imparts knowledge on law and justice. He is the coordinator of our Center for Advocacy, Research and Training in Sports Law, under which this course is being conducted.
Mr. Negi's academic journey is marked by excellence. He earned a BA LLB from NUSRL Ranchi and completed his LLM from Nalcha, Hyderabad. His dedication to the field of academia began as a teacher associate in law at DNLU Jabalpur in 2018, followed by roles as an assistant professor of law at Katni Arts and Commerce College, Katni, DNLU Jabalpur, and the Department of Legal Studies at Mangalayatan University, Jabalpur. I'm sorry for pronouncing that. And in 2019, he achieved the distinction of clearing the UGC NET law. So his research areas include criminal law, tort law, constitutional law, legal theory, and administrative law. So it was his passion towards law and sports which initiated the Center for Advocacy, Research and Training in Sports Law. So here the forum is for you, Mr. Professor Abhishek Negi.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Subramaniam, for the lovely welcome speech. Good evening, everyone. My name is Abhishek Negi, and today I've been given a task to talk to you about sports agency and its legal representation. Basically, okay. So when I inquired, so actually, the certificate course is actually happening under our Center of Center for Advocacy, Research and Training in Sports Law, CARTSIL. And when I was inquiring about the sports law, I got to know that time and again a very famous agency regulations of FIFA they have come, and there are a lot of hullabaloo over the regulations. And when I inquired about sports agency, I got to know that sports agency is something which a person who is actually interested in sports law must know, because now sports agency is actually no more only related to a particular sport. Rather, it has become professional uh, uh, means to uh, to follow, and it is actually not that much visible in India. But obviously, if you go to Europe and America, you get to know that sports agency is something which is very lucrative as a profession. So first of all, I would like to uh, talk about that what we are going to discuss in this one hour. So see, if you see the relation of agents with the principal, first of all, why what is the actually the role of the relation of agents and with that of principal? And we all know that this agency works brilliantly in football arena, right? We know that role of in transfer window, role of agents in negotiation, in any salary negotiation, wages negotiation, any uh, commercial advertisements undertaken by these athletes. So the role of agents is pretty much established in many areas of sports, but in football per se, the role of agents are very much prominent to that matter. Now, since I've told you that the role of agents are there, right? So if you could be able to notice in the slideshow, in the slideshow, I have actually colored two W's, right? Because I would like to take forward my discussion with these two W's, right? First of all, any um, law student must ask the presenter that, sir, for what reason uh, the session, the topic of the session um, has been chosen, right? So the first important question, that's first a W question here, is that what are the functions of the agents, right? And after inquiring the functions of agents, the second question, and the second question of the W question, that is why there is a need of regulations, right? And then we'll talk about if regulations are needed and what kind of regulations are needed. That is why whether public regulations are needed or private regulations are needed. What kind and what is the role of FIFA in regulating the area, and why in 2023 are we even discussing about the the agency per se, right? So we are going to deal in this 1 hour about the agent's role, and then if the agent's role, after discussing the agent's role, what are the what are the regulations, if there are any, and if there are regulations, that how those regulations operate. Because if you see the role of principal and agent, it is actually a very private area in which a person would like to hire a person as an agent, and an agent who is actually with his consent becomes the agent of the person. Then why are we even talking about the regulations? Why FIFA is so interested? Why the domestic laws are so interested? For example, we'll talk about the case study of FIFA with the France with that of England, how FIFA regulations are followed in England, and how FIFA regulations are followed in France, if they are followed. So we are going to talk about that. Now, the first W question, that what are of the agent? If you could be able to trace the of agents, right? Initially, these agents are actually the scouts for the clubs, and the role of the scouts is to track or map the upcoming footballers or athletes. They choose upcoming young athletes, and they used to pick those athletes from actually small um, clubs to the club which actually hired the scout. So this is the only role of agents as such initially. But later on, when the clubs become little more powerful, they started having their own scout agency, and then they doing it through the agency, through their own scouts, instead of actually hiring an external. And that is why these scouts, which do not have much role to play now, they have actually converted themselves to an agent of the professional footballers. And they started actually acting as an hydraulic fluid, right, between the transfer markets and between the club and the uh, player or the athlete, right? For example, if you see the role of George Mendes, this George Mendes is actually the very famous agent of Cristiano Ronaldo. That is also, he's also known as CR7. So if you could be able to track the role of George Mendes in cracking every deal of CR7, you'll get to know that how important the yes, also false place. So you could be able to understand that what is the actually role of the agent and how it is important uh, for an agent to be the actually then an asset for a player, because we have also witnessed that there are certain quacks in the field, in which quacks are people who are actually not that efficient, not qualified as such, and they actually act as an agent. And if you could be able to track I don't want to name any player, but you people will get it. If if you follow football, then you'll get it that which player I'm going to talk about. So that player is actually very famous, equivalent to Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi, but because of his choices, right? So he was often criticized of his choices that he make, because he's actually the world class player in terms of skills, in terms of merits, in terms of every skill needed in the field. But yes, we know that because of his choices, then who is making the choices? Is the player who is making the choice, or on behalf of a player, of that player, the agent is making the choice? So obviously it is very important for a player, now a professional player, to have a proper, effective and efficient agent to represent him in different deals and all. Now obviously why the agencies has become so lucrative as a profession, if you could be able to see, you'll get to know that this rapid growth of popularity of sports and sports person per se is one of the reason that why the functions of the agent has become so diversified. In 2023, one of the function of uh, to manage the media portfolio of the player, right? So if I ask you that who is the most followed player in the world, that is actually Cristiano Ronaldo, and after that Messi, and obviously then you'll be shocked to know that in the world, which is actually dominated by football players, and if you could be able to follow United States of America's uh, this rugby and NFL, know that uh, even and even NBA, right? Even uh, King James, whom they call, is actually behind Virat Kohli. So Virat Kohli is the third player who's the most followed player in the world, right? So who manages that, right? So you have often seen that after a match, right, you will see Facebook post of the player, right? And who is managing that? So all these affairs, media portfolio affairs, also the take of the players on social matters or on political matters, these are also dealt by the agent itself. Not only that, if you could be able to trace the players who are involved in any legal battle, for example, Messi got involved with the tax related issues in Barcelona in Spain. So you'll get to know that these legal affairs are also dealt by the agent. So just imagine that the agent is the most important person, right, in the life of the sports. And also after the internationalization of the sport, right now, uh, if you are a follower of Indian football, you'll get to know, you could be able to uh, tell me that the Indian footballers are now started going to Europe, right, to play soccer there, to play football there. So because of the internationalization of the sport, the role of the agents are actually of different folds, and that is why it is very important to have the regulation over the practice of the agents. And obviously, if you see the popularity, in terms of popularity, obviously it is there
Sir,
in terms of, yes,
can you hear me? Sir, could
yes.
you just tilt your camera a little bit down? Your face is only half visible. Yes, better. Thanks.
All right. Now it's okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So if you see, so in terms of popularity, obviously the uh, popularity of sport is there, popularity of person is there, international sport is also, and in terms of population also, this agency, for example, in between 1994 to 2009, the agents rose by 1,000 every year, and in Europe alone. So that's quite a number for the profession like agency. Why to regulate it? Let's talk about also that if okay, now again let's, so I have actually talked about uh, the the uh, the bird's eye view of the role of the agent, right? Now I'll tell you that in football per se, if you could be able to see the role of the intermediary or the agent, the first and foremost role of this agent starts in when it comes to transfer market, right? So what is transfer market? Those who are not know about the terminologies of football, transfer market is basically the market window in which you can buy or sell a player of your club, right? So before 1990s, right, there's a cap of foreign players, right, and there's a cap of movement of the players also. But after the Bosman ruling of the European Court of Justice in 1990s, it opened the Pandora box, in which obviously each and every player could go to the club and play. Although there was a bar that in England, if a country is not having a rank under 100, you cannot hire a player from them. So that is why Sunil Chetri could not be able to get a chance to play in European football that time. But now, since the cap is means gates are open, now it's very important, obviously, to have an intermediary in the transfer market, the role of it. Because obviously, number one, why the role is important? The role is important not only for the athletes. Obviously, for the athlete, it is important. The agent's role is important because obviously for a free transfer, or the what say to have a less hurdles during the transfer market, it's very important to hire professionals, right? So there is no bar that an athlete cannot have the discussion with them by themselves with the club. Many athletes even uh, uh, prefer to actually hire a family member, or they actually negotiate by themselves. But the problem is that there is information asymmetry with regard to the players knowledge and expertise. And if you compare that with the clubs, obviously you'll know that clubs are obviously having more information, right? And could be a possibility that there could be the hurdles which an athlete could not be able to see, and that is why the smooth and free flow of the transfer could not happen. So we know that there used to be and there still are hurdles when it comes to movement of players from one club to another club. For example, Harry Kane transfer got stuck. For example, Mbappe transfer from PSG to Real Madrid got stuck. So there are and it actually it is not good for the image of the player also that if he could not be able to decide that whether he wants to leave the club or he wants to join another club or he wants to stay in that particular club also. So you'll get to know that the relation of the player with regard with that of club also spoils when it comes to the news involved in the in transfer market. So there are so generally during the time of transfer market we hear different kinds of news involved in the player, whether Mbappe or Neymar is going to a club or not, or they are in discussion with it or not. So these information they pop up and actually they actually it puts a dent on the relation with a particular player and the clubs. And to avoid that, the player generally hire the agent so that the agents could act as a cushion over the relation of a player and with that of a club. The second important role of the agent is actually that they are the uh, uh, they are also the representative in contract negotiation. So generally what happens is that there is a contract between two clubs, right? So if a player is playing under my club and if I want to sell that player to another club, and that player there's a existing contract between that player and my club for 2 years, but I really want to sell that player, so I'll have a dealing with an agreement with another club, and obviously the arrangement would be done within the slot of the transfer window. But there is another kind of agreement, and that agreement is actually between the player and the club with regard to the wages, right? So for that, it is very important to have a proper specialized negotiator, because we have seen many a time that athletes are not very much negotiators. They are not very much informed about the particular market, and that is why they often um, seal the deal which is actually not so profitable to them. That is why the information asymmetry, which I have already told you, is very much there with regard to the position of the player with as compared to the club. Also, uh, clubs are actually old players. They do these things, these negotiations, quite often with many players, different clubs. So they are actually oldies in this arena, with as compared to an athlete which might have done the dealings for let's say for 2 or 3 times or 4 times, not more than that. So that means when the clubs they know each and everything, they have the specialized professional for that. They know the actual amount value of a player compared to different players. So they are actually very good negotiators, right? But if the agents were not there, the negotiation should be done by the athletes. Obviously athletes are not good negotiators because obviously they need to focus on the field also. So sometimes it is very difficult for a player to focus on the field and off the field dealings. That is why athletes prefer to have a particular expert on it, and that is and there are other services also in which agent plays a very important crucial role. For example, the role of agents with regard to media negotiations or media setup with regard to personal demands of the players. For example, recently Saudi club hired Cristiano Ronaldo, and Saudi had this law that this unmarried couples, they cannot live together. That means there was a ban on live-in relationship. But through the agents, right? It got actually the law got amended, and now Cristiano Ronaldo is allowed to live with his partner without means breaching the law. So these things also, for example, if you follow football news, you'll get to know that Messi has actually a proper demand with regard to his house, proper demand with regard to his vehicle, proper demand, a specific demand with regard to the people involved in his in the housekeeping. So these personal demands are also taken care of by the also, because if agents won't be there, obviously the athlete has to negotiate these demands, these personal demands with the clubs also, and obviously sometimes they may not work out. So it's very important to have a proper in a professional individual who can actually take care of all the chores of your life apart from the field, right? So you just perform on the field and take each and every dealings and negotiation on the expert. That is why the role and the function of the agents what means they are actually of different types, right? Now, since I've already told you that there are so many issues, right, with regard to so there are, so now I've already told you that there are so many uh, roles and functions of the agent, right? And is the information asymmetry there on with respect of the athletes and the players? Then why do we need to have the regulations? We need to have the regulation, number one, because we have seen that these agents with whom they know each and everything about their principal, that is uh, uh, the athlete or the sports person. And when they know each and everything about the athlete or the sports person, they have actually tried to times again misused this asymmetry, because obviously it's very easy for them to fool an athlete because they might not be having requisite information with regard to any dealing. Also, since there was no regulations before 1990s, there were no regulations per se, and since there was no regulations, right, agents won't work on their wishes. That means it is actually next to impossible for any athlete to even get to know the efficiency and effectiveness of his agents, because obviously he be having the information, and it is actually very difficult for any principal to compare the services of two agents. And time and again we have seen that since there was no there were no regulations, so for agents it was like an open field. So they actually work on their wishes. That means many a times even we have witnessed in the history that there were moral issues with regard to any demands or with regard to any dealings made by the agents. That means conflict of interest was also involved, right? Also, for example, because these agents are, they do not only work for the athlete only, they sometimes work for the clubs also, right? So there was so for any dealing there should be a an athlete, a buying club, and a selling club, right? So for all of them, there were dealings where only one agent has actually represented all of them. So it is very difficult to satisfy the people that there were no conflict of interest. That is why it is very important to at least regulate the market. Also, there are certain economic and political reasons, right? For example, before talking about the economic reasons, I'll talk about the political reason. See, why political reason is because if you see, the third point I have mentioned is for public interest and also for private interest. For public interest, obviously, it is very important because obviously athletes, they were not knowing much about the market, and for the clubs also, because they wanted to have a smooth transaction or a successful transaction without any legal hurdles or any other technical hurdles. So obviously they prefer the professional, but there are certain uh, private interests also involved. For example, they wanted to regulate the market so that no third person would enter in the market. That means there is no proof of that, but uh, there are articles which actually say that these regulations are made just to benefit the existing agents and the organizations, because obviously if you regulate the market in such a manner that you will have a risk on the entry of the market, obviously those people who are actually already there, they will be benefited for that. So there is one more reason of that. Also, the economic reason is also important, because if you see the relation of club and with that of the athlete, and if you see from the economic perspective, why to have the regulations is because it is actually very beneficial, right, for the athlete to have a cap on the percentage of the cut or the commission of the agent. Because if the athlete is not knowing the information, obviously the get the benefit of the lack of information on the part of the athlete, and obviously they can demand the higher cut from the wages or from the deal of the and the club. So we have seen in the past that agents were involved in the corrupt practices. Agents were actually getting the financial assistance from the athletes and from the clubs, uh, apart from actually getting the bonus or the percentage from the deal. So that is why it is very important to have to establish the regulation, to have a regulation, and to mainstream the whole working of the agency. But also, now if I've told you that the working of the agency is important, right? The regulation on the agency is important. Now the second question would be, what kind of standard or regulations are we talking about? Talking about the private standards. Private standards means standards made by non public agencies. For example, um, FIFA is whatever rules FIFA make, it is actually private standards, right? Or the domestic standards, it is actually domestic, right? So domestic standards, because domestic standards means you the country is having the proper laws and legislation with regard to the standards. For example, if you compare the regulations of England and France, you'll get to know that England actually blindly follows the regulation given by the FIFA, right? So FIFA actually, why, first of all, let me tell you that why countries need to follow the regulations and rules of FIFA is because FIFA recognizes the clubs or the country who can play on the FIFA on the who can play the competitions of organized by FIFA, if they will follow the rules and regulations of FIFA. If you could not be able to follow the rules and regulations of FIFA, you cannot participate in FIFA or regulations. So that is why it is very important to follow each and every rules of FIFA. In England follows all these rules, and present England actually frames their regulation at par with FIFA's regulation. But when it comes to France, France says that, so for England has got an association called FA, Football Association, and for France it is FFF. Now this France regulation, France says that we have actually we have legislation over domestic legislation over the agency of the sports agency, and it is not only restricted to football, it is actually it is spread to all the sports events, right? So it is not only for football, it is for all the sports. That is why we cannot amend the legislation of agency, because it is actually a very general law agency. Also, France says that we have certain reservations with regard to the FIFA's regulations, so that we cannot blindly follow or copy paste the FIFA's regulation per se. But there are certain hiccups between the implementation of the regulations. But in 1990, FIFA actually introduced the regulation on football, and he regulated FIFA regulated the agency and said that there are certain entry barriers of the agents. For example, in 1991 regulation, FIFA said that to become an agent, you have to first of all register with us, with FIFA, and you have to pass an interview, a test, right? After passing a test, only you will become the agent, right? And also, after 1991, there are certain regulations which come up, which actually tried to regulate the agency market in football. But in 2015, RWIA regulations 2015 they came up, and 2015 regulations actually the market, because FIFA saw that there are clubs and nations which are actually not following FIFA's regulation, and it is very important to deregularize it, because anyway it is of no use, because many of the nations and clubs, they are not following the regulations given by FIFA. So in 2015 they deregulated the FIFA regulations, right? But after 2015, right, in 2023, right, something very interesting came. FIFA now decided to bring back those standards and regulations which they have given before 2015, and not only they have actually tried to they actually started regulating the C market again with the help of their 2023 regulations. And later on, when this regulations were challenged, right, in CAS, that is actually arbitration. So when it challenged CAS gave the judgment in the favor of FIFA. So that means FIFA regulations are, from October onwards, they are going to implement it, the FIFA regulations. First of all, let's just see that what are those regulations. Then we'll talk about the new regulation. Okay. So, all right. So see, as per the new rules, right, of FIFA, first rule is actually mandatory examination. So they brought back the same mandatory examination of FIFA, and they said that agents will be required to pass an exam which had been abolished in 2015. Once licensed, agents must undergo continuing education to maintain their license. This examination, mandatory examination, had come up because FIFA actually witnessed the entry of quacks in the agency market, right? So there are many agents who are not so qualified, but they were made agents because of some personal relation of the agents with the player. For example, if you could be able to trace the players and agents, you will get to know that there are 2-3 players whose father are actually their agents, right? So to avoid that, FIFA said that now it's very important to have the proper mandatory examination so that we can weed off the quacks and the not so qualified agents, right? Number second is the limit on incomes from players' gross salary. This rule is actually very useful and very important when it comes to regulation on the agency market. Is because when there was no cap, I've already told you, because of the asymmetry, right, of information on the part of the players, they do not know what is the actual price, what is the actual rate, what are the actual informations regarding the transfer markets and all. That is why they are actually getting more than 3 to 5% even of the percentage of the deal. So now FIFA has mandated that an agent will be limited to a maximum of 3% of the player's gross salary when they are acting on behalf of the player or on behalf of the buying club. If the player earns more than 2 lakh dollars per year, the service fee is capped at 5%. That's it. Right. So that means if your principal is getting more, obviously you as an agent should get more. That is why from 3 to 5% has been increased if your player is actually getting a more fee. Also, there was an income. So now it is there. It is actually very specific to that an agent cannot represent three parties. They can represent two parties, but they cannot represent three parties. So if the agent is representing both the buying club and the player, right, where both parties are aware of the possible conflict of interest and written consent has been given, they will be entitled to a maximum of 6% of the player's gross salary. The cap is 10% if the player's gross salary is under 2 lakh dollars per year, right? Another one is maximum income from gross transfer fee. An agent will be entitled to a maximum of 10% of the gross fee when they are representing the selling club. So they have actually distinguished that or the role of the agents with regard to selling club, buying club, and an athlete. And they have, see, the fifth point is ban representation. That means an agent will not be able to simultaneously represent the buying club, the selling club, and the selling club and the buying club, nor all the three parties. That means the single agent is not enough when it comes to tripartite dealings, because obviously FIFA has even witnessed this, that there used to be a conflict of interest on the role of the agent. So it is very important to bifurcate the three parties and to have a ban on the tripartite representation. Next one is a limit on percentage of players' future earnings. These I've already told you that agents were actually initially they were scouts, right? And then they later on transformed themselves into agents, right? So this percentage on player future earnings were actually when the agents when used to get the players who are actually very aspiring and will be having a very aspiring future, do the agreement or the contract before, and they say that on future earnings I'll get the percentage. So the limit is put. For example, representatives working on behalf of the player or buying club will also have their commissions limited to 10% of a player's future annual earnings under $2 lakh, and at 6% for anything over for the length of an agreed contract, right? And next one is the client. See, the clubs will be prohibited from paying agents fee on players' behalf unless their remuneration is below $2 lakh. It has been standard practice in many countries or clubs to pay agents fee on players' behalf. See, basically, what happens during the time of negotiations is that so who will pay the agent, right? So basically, ideally, agent should be paid on the portion of the from the players money, right? Because obviously if the agent is representing the player, so obviously player should pay. But there are many great footballers and athletes who could be able to convince the club that it is not me who is going to pay my agent, it is you who is going to pay my agent, right? So they will crack a deal in such a manner that the agent percentage on the deal would be given by the club only, right? Actually limit prohibited this also. Last, the eighth one is they put a ban on family commission, right? So family members will be effectively banned from earning commissions payment unless they are licensed agents, because of a very famous player, right? And if you could be able to recall, there used to be a player, right? So Erling Haaland is the present player, but his father, right, who's actually who was also a player, who he was getting he received actually 40 million euros when his son moved from to Manchester City to actually from Dortmund. So from Dortmund, when he came to Manchester City, his father also got some money, right? So FIFA inquired about that, and FIFA said that this family commission cannot be possible because obviously this how the third party is getting benefit from the deals from the dealing of the club and the athlete. So this was also now banned to give the family commission. Also, clearing house to approve deals. Now, there should be a clearing house. Every international deal will be passed through an independent clearing house. 5% of all fees will be sent to the clubs is responsible for developing the transferred player. And last one is date of the implementation. This is very important. The provision regarding becoming a football agent, including the requirement for agents to pass an exam and obtain a license, entered into force on 9th January 2023. However, there is a transition period as the remainder of the regulations relating to acting as a football agent, including the obligation to only use licensed football agents, the cap on agents' fee, and limit on multiple representation will not enter into force until 1st October 2023. So obviously it came into force in 9th January 2023, but there are certain aspects which actually started getting implemented after the 1st of this month 2023. So these are the topmost 10 regulations of FIFA, which is actually which actually so these are the 10 regulations which are actually not received in a very sporting manner, because obviously they are actually putting bars on many of the benefits which the players and the agents were reaping. And this is with regard to the agency of the football. Any questions?
Sir, just now you were talking, it was basically for the game of soccer. Is
Yes.
there something similar for other games like cricket? Because even now players are entering into advertisement deals or media and all those things. That's a very big thing that they enter into contracts. So is there something like that with IPL also coming into the picture? So what are the rules relating to cricket?
Okay, ma'am. See, for if you're particularly asking me about the rules relating to Indian cricketers, or because you're asking me IPL and the Indian market per se. So, ma'am, there are so for example, you asked me about the endorsements and the advertisement deals.
The
Those
agents
deals
that are sorry, sir. The agents.
Yes. Ma'am, so we have domestic law. For example, obviously agency has been dealt under Indian Contract Act. Also, the role of the endorser is also recognized now with regard to the Consumer Protection Act. So it is actually purely a contractual affair in India. Basically, actually, it is actually contractual affair in Europe also, but they tried to regularize it with of a private agency, right? So the private agency means the private regulation is actually regulation made by FIFA. But in India, we have the public regulation, which is actually governed by the Indian Contracts Act.
So the BCCI has nothing to do with this. They don't have any kind of rules or regulations relating to agents.
So, ma'am, BCCI generally do not have this the proper regulations per se, and for example, if you see the issues involved in cricket and with regard to the agents in India, agency has not been developed in a manner which is actually there in Europe. So we are coming up the Indian because see I've already told you that in India the role of the agency is basically restricted to athletes affair only, but in Europe it has no more restricted to athletes affair. It is actually governed through the regulations, because obviously agency ka ma'am jo role hai, the role of the agency is not only to have the demand sorted for the athletes, but also to represent the athlete in many forums. And sir, for example, you asked me about BCCI. The role of the BCCI is actually in question. Was in question, and it was actually asked that whether BCCI is the government body or a private body, right? So if BCCI makes any specific rule, it would come under the this private regulation only. Agents are actually becoming integral part of other sports also, sir. Also, ma'am. Cricket also, it is actually coming up, but it is not being commercialized the way it has been commercialized in Europe. FIFA agents fee, please give some more lights to it. FIFA agents fees are okay. So, sir, agents fee during the time of negotiations, how would they get it? So FIFA has actually put regulations on that agents would get the fees on the basis of the percentage, right? For example, 3%, and if the athletes are getting more wages, for example, more than 2 lakh dollars, then obviously they'll get 5% instead of 3. What about other sports, especially agents that I have already told you? Does India have any? Okay, agent contract would be governed under the rules of FIFA and IFA. See, sir, FIFA regulations would be there, because obviously, if you want to get yourself recognized by FIFA, you have to follow FIFA's rules and regulations. Okay, so sir, see, that is what I have already told you, that the problem with France and England, where England blindly copy pasted FIFA's regulations. They said that our domestic regulation should be at par with the FIFA's regulation. But France said that no, we have a domestic law, and we'll follow that domestic law only. We will not cut and copy paste FIFA's regulation. We'll just try to accommodate FIFA's regulation, but we'll not change our own regulation. So if there is a conflict between domestic law versus obviously regulations, regulatory bodies regulation, for example, FIFA in this case, obviously in India, contract law would be given more preference than FIFA regulations. But yes, if you could not be able to fulfill follow the regulations of FIFA might recognize you. And if FIFA would recognize you, obviously you could not be able to play on the competitions organized by FIFA. So nobody is going to force an Indian organization or an athlete to follow the private regulations, but obviously there are certain implications if you to follow it. Then obviously the particular club would be banned on playing for FIFA events. Injunction Dortmund. Would agent contract be governed under contract law? Sir, see, what is your view on injunction issued by Dortmund court for agent regulation? I told you that, sir, FIFA agent regulation, they were not received in a very sporting manner because obviously, not only Dortmund, many of the clubs, they protested because for after coming off FIFA agent regulation. But now it is actually it might not be implemented from 1st of October in Dortmund, because obviously they got the injunction, but later on, sooner they'll have to follow it, because they won a case against all the clubs in CAS. So when they won the case in the arbitration in CAS, obviously these rules would be followed. There are FIFA has actually came up with certain justification, and they said that there are few countries from which these regulations will be implemented from different date onwards, but they have to follow it. So Dortmund, no matter they got the injunction, but I think that sooner or later they have to abide by the regulations. All right. Okay. So you in UK, do the cricketers have agents there? Sir, any sport you can have agent. There is no restriction that you cannot have agents there. Agents on any sport, right? For example, if you see Kohli has got his own agent, right? But the agents and principal relation in other sports are not so developed as compared to football, because obviously the role of agency and the role of club developed in a different manner in this sport as compared to the other. In America, there are certain sports where it is actually getting developed at par with the football. For example, this NBA and this baseball competitions events, they are having the same agency relation there. But in the world, I'm telling you, football has got the most developed agency regulations, or the role of agents uh, uh, means when it comes to these sports, because obviously nowadays athletes are getting represented by the agents in every sphere of the life.
So I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Abhishek Negi, Assistant Professor of Law and the Center Coordinator of our Center for Advocacy, Research and Training in Sports Law, MNLU Mumbai, for his insightful lecture on sports agency and legal representation. I'm sure that your expertise and knowledge have enriched the participants' understanding of this crucial subject. We appreciate your time and effort in sharing your insights with us today. So, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.